meeting at home. Hope you're all sitting comfortably. Just to remind everyone, just mute your microphones. I know that's been said already. The public are attending and will be speaking during this meeting. So just a reminder to everyone that everyone in the meeting can see the chat function. Council meeting at home. I've got an echo. No, I think it's gone now. And also in the chat function, if we can just limit it to "may I speak" and when voting, just a single word. I will try to use the technique we've used to date about trying to get the majority view and then get the against and the abstention votes as they arrive.
Chair, live.
Pardon, say again?
Sorry, you are live now, Chair.
Thank you. And then I've scheduled in 2 5-minute comfort breaks. And when the person speaking, I'll ask Councillor Lisa O'Brien to give the 1-minute warning. I think it worked okay last time. I know an interruption gets people off their track, but it does keep everyone to time, and that seems to work. So we're going to use that. So I'd like to now, on item 1 of the agenda, ask Joe to call out the councillors' names and confirm who's in the meeting, please. Joe, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I will read out the list of councillors' names if you could just respond present. Rob Appleyard.
Present.
Tim Ball.
Present.
Sarah Bevan.
Present.
Colin Blackburn.
Present.
Alison Bourne.
Present.
Shelley Bromley.
Present.
Neil Butters.
Present.
Vic Clark.
Present.
Sue Craig.
Present.
Paul Crossley.
Present.
Jerry Curran.
Present.
Chris Stando.
Present.
Jess David.
Present.
Tom Davis.
Present.
Sally Davis.
Present.
Doug Deacon. Doug, are you here? I think I've seen you join. Okay, I'll move on. Winston Dogood.
Present.
Mark Elliott.
Present.
Michael Evans. Andy Furs.
I'm here.
Kevin Guy.
Present.
Alan Hale.
Present.
Liz Hardman.
Present.
Steve Hedges.
Present.
Joel Hurst.
Present.
Lucy.
Present.
Sorry, I dropped out for a second there. Lucy Hodge, I can see you. Duncan Hounsell.
Present.
Sean Hughes.
Present.
Eleanor Jackson.
Present.
Grant Johnson.
Present.
Dr. Kumar.
Present.
Hal McPhee.
Present.
Ruth Malloy.
Present.
Paul May.
Present.
Matt McCabe.
Present.
Sarah Moore.
Present.
Robin Moss.
Present.
Paul Myers.
Present.
Lisa O'Brien.
Present.
Michelle O'Doherty.
Present.
Bharat Pankania. Hello, is Bharat Pankania here? Okay, thank you. Apologies from Councillor June Player. Vic Pritchard.
Present.
Manda Rigby.
Present.
Dina Romero.
Present.
Mark Roper.
Present.
Richard Samuel.
Present.
Bruce Shern.
Present.
Brian Simmons. Brian, are you here?
Sorry. Yes, present.
Thank you. Alistair Singleton.
Present.
Sean Stevenson McGaul.
Present.
Andy Waite.
Present.
Karen Walker.
Present.
Sarah Warren.
Present.
Karen Warrington,
Present.
Chris Watt,
Present.
Ryan Wills,
Present.
David Wood,
Present.
and Joanna Wright.
Present.
Thank you very much.
So, Councillor Deacon, well, I've got a message that Councillor Deacon's here. Is he?
Yes.
he's still here?
I've seen. Okay.
Same here,
And-
Joe. My mic was switched off.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Barat's here. Councillor Pacania. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael
And Michael's here. Okay. Michael Evans. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Thank you. Okay, Joe, again, back to you for declarations of interest, please. Or were there any apologies that we should have noted? Did you note the apologies?
Yes, I noted one apology from Councillor June Player, and I've had no declarations of interest noted so far.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite confirmation of the correctness of the minutes of the 26th of May and the 16th of June, please. There are two sets of minutes to agree there. Do I have a mover and seconder, please? I've got Councillor Romero and a seconder. Oh, Councillor Karen Walker, thank you. And that's for both, is that for both sets of minutes, please? Yeah, I've got nods. Yeah, I've got nods from both of them. So can we agree that those are a correct record, please? I think just a show of hands will be sufficient in this case. So can we all show hands, please? I've got to flip pages, it's not that easy. Yeah, that's clearly carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I mentioned that we've got 2 5-minute breaks scheduled in the meeting. I'd like to also make a quick announcement about the MJ Awards. I've just been sent information that I've award in leadership in relation to climate emergency. We have been commended for a strong corporate response and governance and use of good evidence base to develop a clear strategy focusing on renewables, energy efficiency in buildings and sustainable transport. So I'd like to send my congratulations to all those involved and the cabinet members leading that, leading the charge on that. So thank you very much. Also, I'd like to now ask, I have asked the council leader, after considering where we are with COVID and the need for continual updating of information that we get from government and finances and all this thing, I'd ask the leader of the council to give a short update, please, on COVID related issues, including any of that government funding that we also have heard about so much today. So if I could ask, and I'm not expecting any debate on this, and if there's any questions, I ask them to send them to the leader afterwards, but I just thought it was right that the council, the council leader, make this statement to all of us, please. So over to you, Councillor Romero.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak to full council. I felt it was important to give council an update on 4 issues. And I know some of these issues have already been addressed in other meetings, but I am also aware that not all councillors will have been at all or any of those meetings. So firstly, I wanted to talk very briefly about our finances. So as you know, government announced a recovery and income compensation scheme for councillors, for councils earlier this month.
I've accidentally minimised.
Do I carry on? The details of this are still not confirmed. We understand that we are to expect a proportion of £500 million as a grant. We believe that we will receive 1.3 million. We are also expected to submit an application to the income compensation scheme, but we are still waiting for details of this scheme. What we do know that as things stand right now, that income from commercial rents will not be included, nor is there any provision at this moment to recompense third parties who run council-owned leisure services. With this in mind, and with no money so far received, the financial recovery plan that we put to Cabinet will still be the main vehicle to get this council back on track for delivering a balanced budget. The second item I wanted to share with you is what happens in the event of a local outbreak. You will be aware that government expected all councils to have a published local outbreak management plan in place by the 1st of July. This we did, and a health protection board was also set up. We have also established a local outbreak engagement board, which comprises of key stakeholders across the region, including public health, the CCG, police, fire and rescue, universities, Curo, and also 3SG. The main role of this group is sharing information and comms. If there is a local outbreak, then communications will be set up to alert the affected community. As a ward councillor, it is likely you will play an important role in making sure everyone is informed. Exactly what will be expected from you will depend on the situation, but I wanted to make sure that you were alerted to this possibility, although there has been no indication that such a situation is likely to arise in Bath and North East Somerset in the near future. Thirdly, and related to this, is the use of local authority powers. Government announced last Friday that local councils will be given some form of lockdown powers. These powers are highly conditional, and we are still waiting for more information, especially around the role of potential and necessary partners around enforcement. Please note, no additional funding has been announced. Finally, recovery. It might seem a bit odd to be looking at economic renewal and recovery during a pandemic, but it is necessary for the economic future of Bath and North East Somerset and the wider region. WECA has been asked by the Prime Minister to create an economic task force. They are working across a wide range of sectors in the region. We in this authority have set up our own economic renewal and recovery board where we can focus on the key sectors in our authority. We are looking at more than survival and looking to build in more sustainability and are working with businesses and important stakeholders on a shared ambition of a greener recovery. May I thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. As I said, any questions on that, straight to Councillor Romero, please, or the Cabinet member associated in that particular question. Next item on the agenda is item 5, urgent business. I've not received any urgent business since the publication of the agenda, so I will move on from there. An urgent decision to note. Now, was there a? That's right. There's no urgent item. The items only to be noted only, okay? So there's an item regarding, now what was the issue? Joe, can you help me here? There was an issue that we needed to just note and
yes,
move on.
it's the Aquis development loan. It was a decision that the leader made as shareholder, and it's been made already, and the details are in the papers if anybody wants to see any more information, but it needs to be just reported to council. So that's what we've done.
Okay, thank you very much. Duly reported. Thank you very much. That's item 6. Now, item 7, items from the public. Now, we've got some speakers first in this item, and then the speakers related to 5G, we've deferred to that specific item on the agenda. So, item 7, I've got David Redwell first. Is David Redwell in the meeting?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you very much. Speaking on behalf of the transport user groups tonight, I want to draw a number of transport-related issues to the council's attention, particularly around the COVID period. First of all, is still the need to recover the bus services properly. We've now got in the third phase of recovery. Of course, bus services and public transport are now the responsibility of the WECA Mayor, no longer the responsibility of Bath and North East Somerset. And of course, Neil Butters and Councillor Wright sit on the joint committee with WECA. So we've still got no buses running effectively at weekends between Radstock and Bristol. We've still got no services running between Bristol and Bath via Bitton, Kelston and the hospital on the 37 route at all. And we've still got no services running effectively in the evenings towards North Bristol via Kingswood and Kingswood via Keynsham, and no weekend service. So, and of course, no number 9 in Bath. So we've still got a lot of the network not running. It's 11 routes not running in the WECA area. And we really need to start to sort this out. We've got 2 more periods of buses coming back, 2nd of August, 7th of September, and I believe 1 in October. So that's my first point on buses. Second point is that's costing £25 million a week to run buses in England. and £180 million to keep trains running in England at the moment, funded by the DFT. So you can see the political situation we are funding of public transport. On the sub-region, we've got the Western Gateway Transport Plan, which needs a lot more work on it. It's lack on public transport. I've picked up the lack of regional bus policy towards Wiltshire and towards Somerset, although Somerset's not part of the Western Gateway Transport Board. But that's out for consultation on the 31st of July. And we also need to look at the rail elements of that, particularly the Portsmouth line and the Weymouth line, and looking at how we're going to upgrade those and spend money on. If it's not in the regional plan, like Transport for the North, then we won't be getting the money from central government when it goes through for funding later in September, when they're looking at recovery money for public transport and regional transport. There's a lot of roads in there, far too many roads.
1 minute left.
Okay, so obviously that needs to be looked at. There's still issues around cleaning and COVID safety on bus shelters and infrastructure. And we need to look very carefully at getting the travel centre opened at the bus station in Bath. So we're somewhere through the transport recovery, but there's an awful lot more to do. And I welcome the constant pressure by Bath and North East Somerset Council, particularly on colleagues at WECA. And I believe North Somerset's a giant to join, because obviously there's a Somerset reorganisation happening, which may look at the future of Baines, North Somerset and Somerset, and about to go consultation on the 29th of July. So there's some of the input. We still need a lot more to do. Transport's at the heart of the agenda for the recovery. We make sure our voice is heard via the Metro Mayor to central government, as the leader of the council pointed out, to the WECA recovery plan.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Now I've got some factual questions, please, from the group leaders. So, Councillor Romero first.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to defer to Councillor Butters, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, David, for your comprehensive input as always. I don't know if you've seen, there has been an update today emanating from WECA, which, for example, talks about changes from the 2nd of August, which will include the 3A Elmhurst to Weston via the RUH. This is Saturday services. The 178 Radstock to Bristol, the 349 Keynsham to Bristol. So there's quite a bit coming out now. Were you aware of those?
Yeah, I'm grateful for the pressure being applied by, particularly by yourself and the leader on WECA. I think there's still more to do. We're still missing some gaps, and there's still more changes to do in September and October. But I think we need to keep pressure on the Mayor.
Sure, we'll do that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Myers?
No questions.
Councillor Hughes?
Sorry, no question.
Yeah, it is. It is to you, isn't it? All Councillor Walker. Sorry,
Thank you, David, for your statement, but no factual questions.
And Councillor Moss.
Hello, David. Hope you're keeping well. I've got no supplementaries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, David. Now, we need to ask you now, David, to leave the meeting. All right, now we'll be asking everyone, and then you can join on YouTube. I've got Mr. Mark McDonnell next. Is Mark here?
Yes, I am.
Over to you.
Hello. The Council's finances have never been under more scrutiny. The particular nature of the asset base from which the Council derives a large amount of its income as landlord and provider of tourist attractions make it more vulnerable than other unitary authorities. This is why it comes as a surprise that the Council forward post-COVID-19 finance plan only goes up to the end of May of next year. Most people think much further ahead than that in their own private lives, and certainly in business. People tend to think long-term, looking into the future and planning ahead, but not this Council, which seems not to be able to look much beyond 6 months. At times like this, a city like Bath looks to its Council for leadership, to show us by its own actions that Bath is back in business and ready to go. And so it comes as a surprise to find that after all this time, the Guildhall is still shut. What sort of message does that send out? By hampering deliveries, forcing shops out of business through inflexibility, and now closing the tourist office, It's as if the council is on a self-destruct mission to damage the city and cut off its lifeblood. As a resident, I ask what's going on. It is easy to point to council officers. They are no doubt hard-pressed and probably confused about the direction of the council is going. But the blame for this negativity and confusion must rest with the administration. They are in charge and the buck stops with them. The country as a whole, through the government, is paying for Bath's short-term problems to the tune of £43 million so far. But what of the next year and the year after? And the council would be expected to stand on its own 2 feet. What then? It's time for this administration to show mettle where it matters, to show that they care about the city beyond their pet projects, and show some leadership and courage.
Thank you very much for that timely finish. So I've got factual questions, so just hold on there, Mark. So Councillor Romero first, please.
Yes, this is a predominantly finance-related question. I'm going to pass to Councillor Samuel.
Thank you very much. Are you aware that the financial recovery plan that the council approved at the beginning of July is only intended to stabilise the council's finances in this financial year, and that longer term plans will be coming forward in the autumn covering the questions you raised?
I'm very glad to hear that.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Councillor Myers, please.
Yes, thank you. Mark, can I ask, in the light of what you've said, would you as a resident be more reassured if the council got on with preparing a longer term COVID-19 recovery plan now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Councillor Walker next.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Do you believe that this council should have a 5-year financial plan put in place because of the COVID-19?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, yeah. And Councillor Moss, please.
In relation to council offices being open, are you aware that Public Health England advice is to work at home wherever possible and practical?
I am aware of that, but I also believe that, you know, you have to give an example and show that we are open. I think there is obviously real benefits in working from home, and obviously, you know, you've got to follow what public health says. But I think that, you know, a lot of people are working from shops, from premises, from offices, and I think the council should show an example by opening up the Guild Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donnell. Now, again, that's finished your slot. You can rejoin on YouTube, but as a member of the public, I now kindly ask you to leave the Zoom. Thank you. Now I've got another member of the public, Emilio Pimentel-Reid. Emilio here.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
I speak to you as a Bath resident who is concerned about the council's neglect of our future as a tourist destination worth visiting. We understand that there are plans to create a new management organization to combine the efforts of Visit Bath and Destination Bristol. In this sort of arrangement, does anyone actually believe that Bath will be prioritized? Bath Echo and Manda Rigby claim on the record that only back office functions will be combined to save money. Who is anyone kidding when Catherine Davis is the interim chief executive of Visit Bath and also the head of tourism at Destination Bristol? What happens to Bath? Residents have already expressed anger at the job loss and closure of Bath Visitor Information Center. What else will follow from there? While we lose our welcoming identity in the tourism landscape, the council seems to lack the vision and direction to protect the independent shops that make Bath unique. Instead of choosing to subsidize billionaire-owned businesses like House of Fraser and Jolly's, known as Jolly's, while local retailers are put to the sword. To make matters worse, Bain seems to lack the understanding that in the immediate future, people will travel to shops by car, while avoiding public transport. Shockingly, Baines has used this very moment to make parking in some of our shopping streets even more difficult, if not impossible. Today, we hear that the Christmas market will not be taking place this year, and yet no alternative plan is offered. This is really bad PR for our city. Surely Baines should have announced an exciting and considered alternative initiative first. The council already looks like it is completely out of ideas. Is there a long-term plan? Does Baines have a strategy? Is there any joined up thinking? And where can we read about it? To the vast majority of residents who love our city, this does not appear to be the case.
Thank you very much, Amelia. I've got Councillor Romero. Factual questions, please.
I have no questions, but I'd like to thank Emilio for his very interesting statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Myers, please.
Thank you. Do you think that this new arrangement you've described for tourism will actually support tourism in Bath and North East Somerset?
Well, I mean, if I'm someone with Bristol as my priority, I doubt that, someone like that will be prioritizing things like the Radstock Museum or the wonderful Somerset and Dorset Railway in Midsummer Norton, or the charming walkways in Northeast Somerset. I believe we will not be a priority and we will get lost.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you for your statement, but no factual questions.
Thank you very much, Karen. Councillor Moss, please.
No questions, but thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robbie. Thank you very much, Emilio. Again, please rejoin on YouTube. You're very welcome to, but I kindly ask that you leave the Zoom meeting now, but thank you again. Okay, so that's item 7 on the agenda completed. Okay, now we move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the petition Stop 5G in Bath. Now, this has been brought as a separate item onto the agenda because it met the threshold of signatures within Bath and North East Somerset, although there are lots of signatures from all over the place. And we've got some speakers. So I've got Fiona Williams, lead petitioner, for 5 minutes. Is Fiona here, please?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, Fiona, over to you. You've got 5 minutes. You've got a 5-minute slot as the lead petitioner, and we've seen the petition in our papers, and we know the main points you've raised. But over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, councillors and council officers. Thank you for the opportunity to present this petition to halt the rollout of 5G in Bath and North East Somerset. It's been an interesting experience collecting signatures on paper and online and speaking to the public on this issue, hundreds of them face-to-face before lockdown. What has been clear is that many people question why the technology is even needed. They don't require their movies to be downloaded instantly or to be gaming on the move. Indeed, many have said they don't believe we need faster, bigger and more powerful tech just for the sake of it. They also ask why they have not been consulted about the rollout in their local area, and they ask who stands to benefit from it. It is true that nobody has been consulted about this rollout and no risk assessments have been carried out. So what is this technology for? What are the benefits and the risks? We're told that 5G is the future, a future of autonomous cars, the Internet of Things, where gadgets and devices talk to each other, and of super connected smart cities controlling traffic flows, monitoring energy use, providing virtual healthcare. Although no one I spoke to had heard of it, Bath and North East Somerset is part of a smart city test site, the rather Orwellian sounding open programmable city region linking Bristol to Bath. Currently, a Wi-Fi mesh connects the city. And there is also high frequency 5G, 60 gigahertz capability between the Roman Baths and the Guildhall. This frequency is known to be harmful to bees, worth considering as you debate the motion for an ecological emergency later this evening. 5G was originally trialled at the Roman Baths in December 2018 as part of a smart tourism project. It was described as providing an immersive experience using augmented reality to create a hologram of a Roman soldier. It all sounded very exciting and futuristic. I completely understand that the council doesn't want to miss the boat with this technology, particularly if we're told that 5G is essential for the local economy. But does the technology actually work day to day? Reviews of 5G phones are less than complimentary. South Korean users are reverting to their 4G phones. Why? Because the higher frequencies used in 5G have shorter wavelengths that don't reach as far. They're easily blocked by rainfall and trees and even bodies, so they do not provide a reliable signal. That is why they will continue to use 4G for coverage, while higher frequencies are needed for their greater data carrying capacity. Because to answer my earlier question, that is what 5G and the Internet of Things are for, collecting data. I find it ironic, having worked in the charity sector and protected all data and had to destroy paper records to comply with GDPR, that we're now being asked to accept constant surveillance via the Internet of Things and other smart technology. Data has been described as the new oil because it will provide companies with highly detailed marketing profiles on their customer base, which is highly lucrative. This is all part of a wider agenda to use AI and robotics, which ultimately threatens a core aspect of our humanity, the right to freedom and to privacy. Reinsurers Swiss Re last year cited cybersecurity claims relating to 5G as a major risk over the next 3 years, alongside health claims. On health, we are told by Public Health England that 5G should pose no risk. But PHE rely on the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation, ICNIRP, whose guidance has been questioned, not least by themselves. Their website includes a disclaimer exempting them from legal liability if their guidance turns out to be wrong. A letter to our group from PHE solicitors stated that public bodies should balance their guidance with information from other sources. Again, PHE would not stand by the legality of their own guidance. I am aware that tonight there will be differences of opinion about 5G's health effects. But what is clear is that there has been no safety testing. Therefore, there is no certainty that this technology is safe. With thousands of peer-reviewed studies pointing to biological harm from 4G, Wi-Fi, as well as 5G, with electrically sensitive people experiencing real physical effects, as we'll hear later, surely a precautionary approach is warranted. We're aware that with the loss of so many powers from local government, you may feel there's nothing you can do. But I would remind you of your duty of care to the people of Bath and North East Somerset, including those who signed this petition. We're asking you to adopt a precautionary approach and do the right thing by your constituents tonight. We're asking you to propose a motion for a cross-party working group to pause the rollout, investigate the health and environmental effects, conduct a risk assessment and report to central government. You can become a trailblazer for human rights, citizen rights, and ultimately the defence of our humanity.
Way beyond your time, Ms.
Thank you. I finished, thank you.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Thank you, Fiona, for your statement there. Now, as a public statement, we'll go around the group leaders as normal. So, Councillor Romero.
No factual questions, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Myers.
No factual questions.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Fiona. No factual questions.
Thank you. And Councillor Moss.
No factual questions.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the next speaker swiftly. Obviously, for this item, Fiona, I'm expecting you to stay in the meeting until the end of the item. So, and that's true for all the other speakers. So, Vanessa Williams-Gray, is Vanessa here?
I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. Over you go. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, and as a local mother, I believe that unless we act swiftly, the negative impacts of 5G technology will trigger a similar health crisis. In February, Public Health England posted on its own website that uncertainties in the science suggest some additional level of precaution is warranted, and excessive use of mobile phones by children should be discouraged. This advice has not been promoted in any public health information campaign, yet surely the public has a right to be informed. Tonight, we're asking for just such a precautionary approach to protect the public, especially vulnerable groups, including children, pregnant women, the elderly, those with chronic health conditions, and the electrically sensitive. 5G enthusiasts tell us that there is no scientific basis for opposing this technology on health grounds, yet the December 2018 issue of The Lancet cited a review of nearly 2,300 studies which found that over 2/3 demonstrated significant biological effects associated with exposure to electromagnetic fields. The official position is that non-ionizing radiation, such as that used in 5G, is safe as it doesn't have sufficient power to cause a heating effect on the body. To measure such effects, the telecoms industry uses a water-filled dummy's head subjected to very short exposures, hardly real-world conditions. A study in May 2020, by contrast, looking at the health effects of 5G technology under real-life conditions, concluded that 5G would adversely affect the entire human body, exacerbating the effect of other toxins. A recent review of research on health effects in populations living within 400 meters of a mobile mast found evidence of cancer clusters and other health impacts in a staggering 32 out of 33 studies. Another major study has found a clear link between exposure to wireless radiation and infertility. In 2011, the World Health Organization classified the emissions from wireless technology as a Class 2B possible carcinogen. There are now calls to upgrade this. It's not only cancer. Radio frequency radiation affects our cells long before cancer develops. When the exposure is repeated or prolonged, it may cause effects including sleep disorders, cognitive impairment, dementia, and infertility. Exposure may also cause damage to our cells and DNA. The consequences for health can be especially serious because radiation from wireless technologies is not constant but pulsed, which is much more damaging, yet has not been industry tested. Babies and children are especially vulnerable due to their smaller bodies, thinner skulls, and the fact their lifetime exposure will be longer. The Council has a duty of care to all of its citizens and liability for public health, but surely, above all, a responsibility to its most vulnerable, including future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for that. Again, I'll go around the room. Councillor Romero?
No factual questions.
Councillor Myers?
No factual questions.
Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Vanessa, but no factual questions.
Thank you. And Councillor Moss?
No factual questions.
Thank you very much. Again, Vanessa, just stay there while we've got this item on the agenda. I've got Sarah Greensides next. Is Sarah here? Sarah Greensides? Joe, do we know if Sarah's... Is that someone saying hello?
Hi, Andy. I think Sarah was trying to join. I was getting various messages, but it appears she hasn't yet. So
okay, I'll move on
and she comes in.
Exactly. I'll call her. I'll call her at the end. So it's Samantha Davis. Samantha's next on the list. Samantha here.
Hello.
Hello, Samantha. Over to you, Samantha. Over to you. 3 minutes.
Hello. The insurance industry and 5G risks. Back in the 1990s, Lloyd's of London was overwhelmed with claims for harm caused by asbestos. This flood of claims nearly destroyed Lloyd's. They have no intention of repeating this. Their original risk analysis in 2010 regarding non-ionizing radiation was based on exclusion clause 32 concern that it was becoming the new asbestos. In 2015, they introduced for their underwriters, its purpose is to exclude cover for illness caused by continuous long-term non-ionizing radiation exposure, i.e. through mobile phone usage. It is standard across the industry. Swiss Re, the world's largest insurer, took a similar view. Then in last year's emerging risk report, they added 5G, along with the Internet of Things as a high impact risk, anticipating an uptake in claims relating to health effects, as well as cybersecurity from the rollout of this technology. The insurance industry has performed their due diligence and conducted risk analysis based on peer-reviewed science and quite clearly see the potential for financial loss. The asbestos claims only affected a small vocational group. The potential claims against the wireless industry and increasingly end users could be from the general population at large. Given the scale of the infrastructure being rolled out for 5G, insurance companies could stand to make very large profits. And yet, although they can insure from 2015 under Exclusion Clause 32, it becomes near impossible to get cover for harmful effects from non-ionizing radiation. The insurance industry are voting with their feet and are simply walking away from 5G and non-ionizing radiation in general. Parallel to this, Central Association of Agricultural Valuers have warned landowners of the hidden risks and responsibilities associated with having telecoms masts on their land. Without exclusion zones information, landowners and the public do not know whether the area surrounding a mast is safe, nor do they know how exposed to potential claims they are. Also, the industry are rewriting contracts to reduce their liability. Finally, 2 requests of Bath and North East Somerset Council approach national government for a bond to identify and ensure the council has some kind of protection against future claims, conduct contingency planning for health, liability, financial issues arising from exposure to a Class 2B carcinogenic non-ionizing radiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Just hold on there. So I'll go around the room again. Councillor Romero.
Thank you, Chair. No factual questions.
Councillor Myers.
No factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Karen Walker.
Thank you, Samantha, but no factual questions.
And Councillor Moss.
No factual questions.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you, Samantha. I'll stay in the room while this meeting's while we're on this item on the agenda. So I've got Paul McLaughlin. Is Paul here?
I am here. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can see you now and hear you. Yes. Yeah, you need to probably speak a bit closer to the screen.
Sure.
Thank you.
Over a year ago, I was involved in implementing a Wi-Fi network for over 100 desktop users. The office previously had desktops all hardwired. We created Wi-Fi access points around the building and swapped the hardwired desktop units for individual laptops, each plugged into docking stations. The laptops were either always on charge when plugged into the docking stations or on Wi-Fi when staff wanted to roam around the office and the meeting rooms. A month after the implementation, I started to suffer badly from anxiety. This led me to sometimes not being able to think or get my words out while in the office. I started to work from home and realised when I wasn't in the office, I was fine. I'd always been into keeping fit and eating healthy, but these 2 topics became more of a disorder. The more anxious I became, the more I would spend on studying nutrition. I even implemented a water filter in our house, looking for every possibility on what was causing me to feel so bad. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that all of this was caused by the stress of my job, and so I decided to hand in my notice. I started another role as a consultant working from home. I started to research about electrosensitivity and at first thought it was all one big joke, but it also scared me stupid. If I found out I was electrosensitive, how was I going to support my family? It had to be something else. My health checkups were fine, I was regularly exercising and eating healthily, and I could now rule out stress at work as my new job was a lot less intensive. I decided to use logical methods to try and disprove my illness. One area I could never relax in was my kitchen, so I decided to switch off the electric flooring. Within a day of switching it off, I could relax in the area. I then started to reduce EMF and Wi-Fi in my house. Again, in the rooms I managed to reduce it, the symptoms subsided. I sometimes used to wake up in severe mental and physical pain. I decided to turn off the electric from the mains at night. I recommend everyone to go home and try this just for one night and see if it makes a difference in how you feel in the morning. I started to have the best night's sleep I have ever had in my life and continue to do so. What I also noticed was my son stopped grinding his teeth at night after years of problems. I now have no Wi-Fi and all equipment cabled. The anxiety has subsided, but as part of my job, I sometimes visit company offices where I frequently get severe neck and jaw pain, and the anxiousness returns. I also have to be careful when choosing places to stay when working away. I'm currently learning fast on how to reduce these risks. What I was finding once exposed to any type of EMFs or high electric frequency I seem to take longer to recover. Over the past year, I've contacted other sufferers who have the same symptoms and use the same preventions I have to stop any mental or neurological disorders. My conclusion is this is very real. I feel normal when not exposed, symptoms return when exposed. The big question I have is, what is all this radiation actually doing to all of us? After the Bath announced that 5G would be introduced to the city, I want to make the council aware of the pain this will cause so many people. It affects us all in the long term, our children especially. As a family living in Bath, we do not consent to this rollout. If I lived in Sweden, I would have had a medical diagnosis of electrohypersensitivity.
Time up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'll go around the room again. So, Councillor Romero.
No factual questions from me. Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
No factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Paul, for your statement, but no factual questions.
And Councillor Moss.
No factual questions, thanks.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay, so the last speaker on this item I've got is Karen Churchill. Is Karen here? Before I ask Sarah Greensides again, if Sarah is available.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Karen.
Good evening. Good evening.
Evening, go ahead. 3 minutes.
Okay, there is peer-reviewed science showing harm. How much and how long it takes for the long-term effects to be fully manifest is uncertain, but certainly some people are suffering from wireless radiation from the Gs we already have. So careful consideration is needed before adding 5G. Has 5G been tested? No. Is 5G being risk assessed? Certainly not in the case of WECA's funded Bristol is Open 5G project. Are we being properly informed of the risks? No. ICNIRP say electric currents may cause tissue damage if you have fillings, teeth braces, pacemakers, so they exclude everyone with metal implants from their safety guidelines. Who is informing these people that they are at risk? No one. Did Bath inform staff about radiation risks of millimeter waves at the spa when testing the virtual reality installation? No. We are all relying on PHE guidance to be protective, but is it? Are EMFs being properly regulated? No. Currently, we rely on telecoms self-certifying with no oversight, details of frequencies being employed, and where safe areas around the mast extend to are not being declared. And who is looking at the hotspots caused by interference? No one. Compliance for individual masts and individual pieces of equipment is insufficient to regulate this pollutant. There are at least 5 things wrong with ICNIRP as an organisation. They're a very small group of people. Many have financial ties to industry. They're a closed group. They are self-appointed. 400 scientists and doctors are appealing against their methods. An Italian court has ruled their review of science is unreliable. Many countries have safety levels 100 times lower than theirs. Why? Why are PHE relying on ICNIRP?
1 minute.
We should be able to rely on the BBC for information, but they are heavily invested in 5G. And one example of bias was when they recently misrepresented Professor Deborah Davis. It is tempting to set aside the concerns about 5G because of COVID and think, what can we do locally anyway? It's even tempting to think the advantages of 5G for tracking and monitoring justifies a speedy rollout. But what if the effects of 5G and tech itself causes devastating health and environmental effects? Smoking and asbestos safety took years to establish. ME was ridiculed as the yuppie few for years. Sweden are ahead of us. They acknowledge that electrohypersensitivity is a physical condition. While Michael Mansfield is legally challenging the PHE centrally, locally, we can apply the precautionary principle by actioning a statutory nuisance complaint and pass the risk assessment to the wireless equipment suppliers. We would welcome the opportunity to form a working group and work with you going forward. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'll go around the room again. Councillor Romero.
Thank you, Chair. No questions from me.
Councillor Councillor Myers, sorry. Councillor Myers.
Thank you. No questions from me.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Karen, for your statement, but no factual questions.
Thank you. And Councillor Moss, please.
No questions, thanks.
Thank you very much. Now, under Procedure Rule 34, I would be asked to open up a 10-minute debate if the two leaders of the two larger groups wish to do so. I will ask both of them their view on that because this is such a big subject and maybe 10 minutes wouldn't do it justice. So I don't know how we're going to play this. But over to you, Councillor Romero first, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I first would like to thank the 5G petitioners and for the statements that have been raised. The statements that you have made. I think I need to be clear that we are not going to debate this petition since we'll only be able to give our opinion. The matter that you raise is an issue for national government, so I suggest you speak to your local MPs and also write to the Prime Minister, as it is government that needs to be persuaded to halt the rollout. What I do propose is that we will pass the petition and your statements to the relevant cabinet members for their consideration, and they will respond to the specific points that you raise on the petition. But thank you again for speaking to us this evening.
Thank you. And Councillor Myers, do you have a view on that, please?
Yes, I'd like to thank again the petitioners and say that I very much support what Councillor Romero has described as the course of action. So thank you. Okay, thank you. So before I leave this item and go forward on that, there's some people have been asking the question about, it was Sarah Greensides was the questioner who wasn't in the room, so to speak. We can't contact her, but we do have a statement in the pack. So I did notice her statements in the pack. So please go away and read that to give her the ability to at least give her view. I would leave it with Councillor Romero and the Cabinet then to form that view, please, and make sure that a proper statement is made, at least addressing, well, at least, but there's loads of issues, but at least addressing the items that the petition raises, please.
Absolutely, yes, that's what I have laid out. That is what our intention is to do.
Okay, thank you ever so much, everyone. So I close this item on the agenda. Thank you very much, public speakers. Thank you for your time and effort and writing all those things and sending them to us. I will make sure that the Cabinet do take due cognizance of those issues and answer the questions raised in the petition. And if you could kindly leave the meeting, you can join us again on YouTube as an ordinary member of the public, but I ask you to leave the Zoom meeting, please. And we will have a 5-minute comfort break, please. My clock says, well, 19:22. What does yours say, Mike?
Same, Chair.
Yeah, 19:22. So 5 minutes, we reconvene, please. So stretch your legs and I'll see you then. Okay, thank you. Mike's gonna do the magic. Okay. Okay, welcome back. I'm not on mute. Welcome back, everyone. Now, next item on the agenda this evening is item 9, the Treasury Management Outturn Report. I believe I've got Councillor Samuel to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. There's a bit of feedback on my line here. I'm not sure. Is that somebody with the mic on? Because it's giving me terrible feedback. Okay, I'll carry on. So this is the annual report to Council that sets out the Council's performance over the previous financial year. So in this case, 2019-20, in relation to Treasury management. It's prepared in accordance with SIPFA guidelines, and a set of Treasury indicators are used to assess the Council's performance, previously agreed by Council. And these are set out at Appendix 1 to the report. The report was considered yesterday by the Cabinet and was approved. And in the indicators I've just referred to, this includes indicators for borrowing, prudential limits for borrowing, interest rate exposure and the like. And in all instances in the report, the Council remains within the limits, benchmark limits set previously. The report also sets out an investment statement at Appendix 2, showing that 57.3 million was invested at the end of during 2019-20, and together the detailed makeup of those investments is also set out in the report to you. Interest earned on those investments over the year was £607,000 gross, and that was an improved position compared to 2018-19. The average return on investments against the benchmarks is set out in Appendix 3, and this shows that in the last financial year, overall financial performance improved to 1.02%, 0.44% over the benchmark of 0.58%. So it was a better than expected year. Full details of the Council's borrowing of £232 million is set out in Appendix 4, and members will note that the majority of that borrowing is long-term borrowing taken out by the Council. A couple of other things of note. A review of fossil fuel related investments took place during the year with the purpose of ensuring the Council is not placing its funds in investments that could lead to fossil fuel depletion. The current position is set out in paragraph 3.13, and we will wish over the coming year to try and reduce this further, even though it's a very small proportion, as you'll see in the report. Members will also note that some short-term borrowing was undertaken in April to ensure cash flow resilience as the COVID outbreak hit. And members will also note that during the year, the government's sudden and rather preemptive decision to hike Public Works Loan Board interest rates took place, thus substantially increasing costs, borrowing costs to local government, and a move that has been deplored across the sector. So, Chairman, with those comments, I move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Samble. I believe I've got a seconder, Councillor Elliott, to second.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd like to thank officers for their hard work and diligence in managing the Council's investment and borrowing. The last few months have demonstrated the importance of sound financial management in providing a solid basis on which to plan when shocks occur. And I note in paragraph 3.23 the prudent action taken to ensure the Council's liquidity as the coronavirus crisis started to unfold. I echo Councillor Samuel's pleasure at seeing the work on fossil fuel investments being reduced. And I also note in Appendix 6 the Council's investments well exceeded the benchmark rate of return for every month of the financial year. So an excellent achievement. I'm happy to second the recommendation to note the report.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've got at least one speaker. I've got Councillor Paul May to speak. That's been moved and seconded. So Councillor Paul May, please.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Conservative Group, we support this report. I think when we've been in the administration, we've always complimented the officers, and it's really good to see that the council retains AA plus status, and I think it reflects really well on the council. And we are in difficult times, but the track record for this report is absolutely superb. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor May. So I've got no other speakers. No one's indicated on the chat function. So I'm going to draw a line under that one. Thank you. So that's so those in favour of the recommendations as put that have been duly moved and seconded. So I will take there's a majority view on this paper as it's been supported across the chamber. So any of those who are against or abstain, please, can you type in to chat against or abstain? Just give that a second. I don't think there is. Okay, I'm pausing because sometimes people have to spend a little bit of time just do it. Okay, so I believe there's no votes against, no abstentions. Someone would shout at me in the meantime, I'm sure. So that's been that's unanimously supported. So thank you ever so much, everyone. So that's the end of item 9. Joe is Joe. I'm sorry, I announced the result there. Joe, are you there? Joe's having difficulty with a computer.
I am here.
You
yes,
are here?
I am having
Okay.
difficulty, but I am here and I agree. Thank you. That was unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much again. Thank you, Joe. Okay, item 10, amendments to the Constitution. Now, I'm going to invite the monitoring officer to give us a lead into this, and then I shall be asking Councillor Ball to move the recommendations. Before I ask the monitoring officer, can I say this is quite a complex technical item, so we need to go a little bit slowly and be clear on what we're voting on and what we're not voting on any one stage. So apologies for the slowness, but we need to just get this right. So over to you, Maria, as monitoring officer first, please. I've got Councillor Dina wanting to say something as well. Dina, oh, sorry. Before we start, Dina, you've got a declaration of interest of you to state.
That's absolutely right. Yes, and I apologise for not saying it earlier. As the shareholder, as council leader, I'm the shareholder of ADL, and therefore it would be perceived that I have an interest in this paper as ADL is referred to. So I'm going to absent myself for this item, and then I'll rejoin the meeting when this one is done. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So any questions as of leadership, I'll be passing to Councillor Samuel, but and then I'll see you back at the end of the item. So Maria, back to you. Sorry, Maria.
Yes, apologies to council. You had actually already agreed Appendix 4 on bullying, and it's the addition to the Code of Conduct. I'm sorry, that was overlooked. I was so keen to have it in there, but you did actually pass it in October 2019, so that's been withdrawn. Thank you. Okay,
so that item has been withdrawn. It's not for discussion necessarily or whatever, so we don't need to spend time on that. It's already been agreed. So over to you, Councillor Ball, and take us through this gently, please. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and take it through as gently as possible. From time to time, we need to look at the planning delegation issues as issues arise with us across the council and look to correct any anomalies that we actually find to make it simpler for members to understand and simpler for members of the public to understand as well, of how the council works and how we get items debated in public. Many people believe all planning applications should be publicly debated, but that is not possible under government regulations and rules. And 95% of the government has to be officer delegated issues. But there again, we need to look at these issues every now and then to make sure we pick up the items that we actually need to ensure we receive public debate. And that's what the alteration is this evening, to ensure that we actually get a scheme that we're able to run properly, that the public understand and councils also understand. Therefore, I'm going to move, and I'll explain a bit more afterwards. At 2.1, we agree the revised planning delegation scheme for adoption attached to Appendix 1 of the papers in relation to the points described in sections 3.1 to 3.3 of the papers, with the addition of words "and vice chair." So that the scheme reads as follows. Any applications for which a council or ADL, Aqueous Developments Limited, is the applicant involving more than 2 properties will be reported to the planning committee unless the chair and vice chair of the planning committee deem them too trivial, in which case they'll be dealt with under officer delegation, and agree that this revision will apply to all council and ADL applications pending consideration. That's the recommendations I'm moving this evening. To explain slightly further, as I know 1 or 2 questions have already came up, 2 or more items is 2 or more ADL properties that are either in the planning application or are actually owned by the council or ADL. But that one clears up that pretty quickly, that particular item. So that I've moved that now. I'm going to leave it at that particular point and answer any questions at the end of the session if need be.
Thank you, Tim. I've got a second, Councillor Myers to second.
Thank you. Yes, I would say our constitution of the council is a key document which underpins our democratic process, and as such it's vital that we keep it up to date and effective. And so this report now remaining sets out proposed amendments of the constitutions on planning, and I'm happy to second. And I'd like to thank Councillor Ball for incorporating our concern with regard in inserting the words of vice chair. I'm very grateful that that has now been included, because I think it is an important thing that we work on with that consultation. So thank you. So I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I have a Labour amendment on the table, and I've got some speakers. So I've got a Labour amendment. So I've called Councillor Johnson and then a seconder. I don't know who the seconder is. Councillor Johnson.
Oh, hi, thank you. Yes, just can I just start by quoting the first sentence of section 1.1? The Constitution is a single point of reference which contains the principal governance structures and procedures of the authority. With this being the case, the simple question that must be asked is why the Constitution wasn't changed as a matter of urgency after we declared a climate emergency over a year ago. The Liberal Democrats like to say that they are the champions of the climate emergency, but there seems to be very little action that backs it up. This administration has been slow to react to the climate emergency declaration and slow to enact the promises that it made to the residents of Bath and North East Somerset. You might be having an award nomination for leadership in responding to the climate emergency, but from where I'm sitting, leadership is what has been lacking for some time from this council. We as a Labour group think it's about time that this administration holds its hands up to the fundamental mistakes that it made and lets them going back to Conrad Energy with their tail between their legs. How can a council that declared a climate emergency over a year ago then go and improve planning for 3 massive fossil fuel burning gas generators? The goal was to be carbon neutral by 2030. So I can safely say you're not going to be achieving that anytime soon. We all feel regret for the mistakes that the Planning Committee's Liberal Democrat chair and Conservative vice chair have made during the time of great uncertainty, and for the mistakes made by the independent and Conservative councillors that represent the residents of Midsummer North and North for not calling this in. Indeed, I think the Labour group are the only members of this council that see these gas generators as the fundamental evidence residents need to show that this council is not committed to the climate emergency. If you make commitments, don't break them. So let's all acknowledge this council's failings by supporting Labour's amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I've got Councillor Moss to second, I believe.
Yes, I'm just seconding, formally withholding my remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, so we've got an amendment on the table now. Is everyone aware of the amendment that we have on the table? Yeah. Everyone's received that. There was a circulation of it in the papers for tonight. So I'm assuming that everyone's got sight of that. If not, please type in the chat and somebody will get some information to you, I'm sure. I've now got a list of speakers and I'll read out what I've got so far. I've got Councillor Rigby, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Watt and Councillor Samuel. So Councillor Rigby first, please.
Chair, will you be asking the mover of the original motion whether they accept the amendment?
Very good point, yes. Councillor Ball, will you be accepting that amendment?
Certainly not.
There you are. Thank you for that. That's okay. But you're right, Lisa. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so Councillor Rigby, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was really disappointed when I read this amendment. The Planning Committee is cross-party and it makes its decisions based not on party lines, but by weighing up the balance of all the policies in place and making the best decisions it can given all the inputs. This is not the place for disgraceful party politicking. And even if it were, then the mover of the amendment should at least have politicked correctly. As I said, planning is a plan and policy-led statutory body. The chair of planning followed every policy to the letter. The reason the application reference did not come to committee was that for whatever reason, the two ward councillors failed to refer it to committee. It is precisely because of this, we are seeking to change the scheme of delegation so this does not happen again. I'm unaware if the mover of the amendment has attended planning training, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt over his error. But given this fact, I hope that the mover of the amendment will now withdraw it and offer an apology. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. I've got other speakers, but I will be obviously returning to Councillor Johnson before we sum up on the amendment. So I've got Councillor Jackson.
Well, Chair, you've really put me in a very awkward position. You have allowed Councillor Rigby to speak, in fact, to move an amendment, and I'm really would have appreciated it if you could have asked the monitoring officer to clarify whether those of us who are members of the planning committee can have a dispensation to vote on this issue. The amendments, if accepted to the Constitution, will in fact come before the planning committee next week for a vote. And I don't know if we're allowed sort of two bites of the cherry like that. So would you mind asking the monitoring officer for a ruling, please?
Very happy to do so. Just pause, everyone, and I'll bring in Maria to make a statement on that, please.
Yes, I mean, these are amendments to the Constitution. The scheme of planning delegations is part of the Constitution. So the planning committee are not particularly affected, but I'm happy to issue a general dispensation. It's not a pecuniary interest. If it's anything, it's a personal interest because they're members of the committee. So a dispensation is fine for me to issue.
Thank you, Maria. Does that answer your question, Eleanor?
Yes, I mean, I was concerned, you see, that we were in a situation where the planning committee is like the executive, having to carry out the wishes of the council, but at the same time involved in the legislative, as it were, in making the decision. But if the monitoring officer is quite happy and has given us a dispensation, that's fine. I think, am I allowed to carry on speaking?
Yeah. I was going to say now, yeah, because you're down to speak. So yeah, please speak.
Yeah. So I can appreciate Councillor Rigby's exasperation, but we believe in the Labour group that the climate emergency is such a critical issue and so important that it behoves us to scrutinise every single thing that comes before the council, whether it's a planning application or a scrutiny panel health issue or a matter of housing, whatever it is, we should be thinking climate emergency, climate emergency, climate emergency. And I think it's most unfortunate that this planning application has gone through, as Councillor Rigby quite correctly said, because the ward councillors did not call it in. And also, I am told that the attitude of Midsummer Norton town council was not sufficiently clear that they objected. And the general rule of thumb is that if an application is opposed by the parish or town council and the officer is minded to permit, then it comes to committee. So somehow or other, it fell through the cracks at a time when, of course, we were under considerable strain because of the outbreak of the COVID emergency. But I do still think that the climate emergency matter should be overriding, and I hope the Labour Party amendment will be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I've got Councillor Watt, but I believe that's on the substantive. I've got Councillor Samuel. Is that on the substantive or on this amendment, please?
That's on the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Samuel, I'm Councillor Watt. If I've got that wrong, just please tell me. But Councillor Samuel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to vote against this. This is a horribly personalised attack on the Chairman of the Planning Committee, fulfilling the wishes of Council in the way that the committee does its business. This is cheap politics, and it has no place in this chamber, and we should reject this amendment because we can all see what it's about.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I've got no other speakers then on the amendment, so I want to, now is the procedure to go back to Councillor Grant? I can't remember. Got too many bits in front of me, but there was a question raised, so I will allow you to at least answer that question that was raised, Councillor Grant. Johnson, sorry.
Yes, it's Councillor Johnson, but thank you. I appreciate this is difficult to do over Zoom. Yes, so my point was on the decision to build free gas generators behind a school in Midsummer Norton, and I think it was a valid one. And you know, does the health of young children in our authority matter for nothing in planning decisions? Because I think it does. And I think this isn't about politics. This is about poor decision making from this administration. And I stand by my comments and by our amendment.
Okay, and I think the procedure is that I now ask the mover of the original, which is Tim Ball, to add any comment before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll add a few comments on this line. Any councillor can comment on a planning application. Any councillor across the district can comment on an application. I don't think I'm aware of any Labour Party comments regarding the consultation period on the gas generator application. I'll be correct if I'm wrong, but I actually think I'm right on this particular issue. So it's all well and good attacking somebody who's a chair of planning committee. Every councillor, all 59 of us, have responsibilities to look at the planning lists. In my belief, every council on the council should be planning trained to understand the planning system. So let's reject this amendment tonight. It's a vindictive attack on one member, which is unfair and unjust.
Thank you, Councillor Ball, for that. Now, just when we go into this vote now, so the Labour amendment, we're voting on the amendment, yeah? Just so everyone's over, we'll be coming back to the substantive in a minute. We're voting on the Labour amendment. By hearing the debate, I will make a presumption that there will be the majority vote against. Yeah. Now, if we get very close, we'll have to come back. All right. But this is how we're going to play it because it would take forever tonight otherwise. So the majority vote is against. So those in favour of the Labour amendment or abstaining, can you please vote now? So, Joe, are you seeing these votes coming in?
I am, yes.
I'll just give it a second or two. So at the moment, I'm seeing at the moment 3 in favour and 1 abstention. Just give everyone else a chance. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 in favour now. 1 abstention. Okay, so that looks like where we are. The majority are against. There are 4 in favour, 1 abstention. So that amendment falls. Am I right in
Correct.
saying that? Okay.
Yes, yes.
I just want some verification of that.
Sorry, yes.
So no, it's not. So we go back to the substantive now. Apologies for the slowness of this. So on the substantive, I've got a speaker. I've got Councillor Watt to speak. I've got no other speakers at the moment, so please jump in. So on the substantive, please, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm finding it very difficult to support these amendments. Broadly speaking, they are all fine, apart from the change of the constitution that would permit an application made by the council or ADL to not come before the committee as a matter of course. And the reason for my objection is that we have a well-established requirement actually in our constitution that says that if an elected member or an employee of the planning department I can't remember the exact specific, but basically if an employee of the planning department or elected member or indeed a relative of them brings an application to the council, that it is compulsory that application has to go in front of the committee. And that's quite appropriate in order that the public can see that there's appropriate transparency over that process. And what it's doing, the intention of this part of the constitution, indeed part of the law in relation to elected members, is that if anybody's in a position or seen to be in a position of significant influence over these processes, then there should be a higher degree of transparency over the decision making to ensure that those people in that position of potential influence, whether exercised or not, are not getting a different outcome from the planning system than any other member of the public or a corporate body. And I find quite objectionable the idea that the council should consider itself not in the same situation as one of its employees or one of its elected members. It is self-evidently obvious that the council, in its corporate capacity, is in a significant position of influence over the planning process. And it is therefore I don't understand how anybody could imagine it would be appropriate that an application coming from the council would not be treated in exactly the same way as an employee of the planning department or indeed an elected member. All three of those bodies are capable, whether they do or not is irrelevant, but they're capable of bringing undue influence over the planning process. And indeed, these applications should be treated in the same way. There should be no question that applications by the council or ADL as a subsidiary of the council or owned by the council should come to the planning committee. It is nothing short of obnoxious, actually, the idea that the planning chair should be required to consider whether something is trivial or not. They should come as a matter of course in order to deliver the transparency that is required over applications from corporate bodies or individuals or elected members who can bring significant influence over the planning process. And I think to not have been advised in that way by whoever's advising the council on these changes implies that the council considers its corporate position as more important than the required transparency for members of the public.
Thank you, Councillor Watt, for that. Thank you. Now I've got two other speakers on my list now on this substantive. I've got Councillor Jackson and Councillor Samuel. So Councillor Jackson first, please.
Thank you very much for letting me speak for a second time. I think Councillor Watt has hit the nail on the head, actually. He has, of course, some experience of putting in planning applications, but perhaps it's easy to overlook the ones that we've actually turned down. Wellsway School, for instance, we've turned down 2 applications when they were redesigning their campus, and we finally got something which I think is very good. There have also been a number of primary school applications at the time when these schools were directly under Baines and not academies that we've also rejected. So I think the planning committee can be relied upon to be impartial when it comes to looking at an application from the council itself or from ADL, and I speak with 12 years experience of the planning committee. I think these amendments, however, will set things out nice and clear, because we are always having members of the public getting involved in applications who never had anything to do with it before and who need something clearly set out. And we also have quite a number of new councillors, and to have it all much better organised than it was before, when it was really a matter of custom and practice, I think is commendable. So I hope councillors will support these changes to the Constitution.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Jackson. I've got Councillor Samuel, but before I call Councillor Samuel, Joe, there's something that we missed, one of the in favour vote. I know it doesn't change the result, but one of the in favour votes for the the Labour amendment. So can you just make sure you've seen that in the chat function, please? So Councillor Samuel, please.
Thank you, Chair. I understand Councillor Watt's sentiments in the speech that he's just made. And what I wanted to say was that in my role as Cabinet Member for Resources, one of the things that I'm responsible for is the way that the Council's corporate estate is managed and works are undertaken. What I can say to Council is that the Council itself undertakes a substantial amount of work in our community every year. And of course, where those works take place in a city, such as Bath, many of those will have a conservation area aspect to them. So there are many maintenance schemes and improvements and alterations that are carried out that are at the moment dealt with under officer delegated powers. So I think for me, the key words in this proposal to amend the Constitution are those that deal with triviality, because I trust the Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee to make the decisions as to what is trivial and what is not. And I think that the amendment to the Constitution that is proposed deals with the important point of principle, which I completely agree with, is that council and council-controlled companies' applications should come to the Planning Committee unless they are deemed too trivial. So I support this in the way that it's drafted for exactly those reasons. What we do not want the Planning Committee to be dealing with is many items of small works that are undertaken by the council itself that are not controversial in any shape or form and do go through the planning process and are dealt with by officers. What we want to capture here are the important applications that have a big impact, and that's why I'll be supporting this amendment. Sorry, this.
That's right, yeah, the motion, yes. So I've got no other speakers. I'm going to ask Councillor Ball now as the mover of the original, of the substantive, to sum up, and then we move to a vote. So, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I assure Councillor Watt that any controversial application, any large applications, will go to the Planning Committee? Members still have a right to call applications in for consideration by the Chairman, despite these changes tonight. These are intended to help and assist large applications and applications that wouldn't have normally gone to the Planning Committee to actually go. A few years ago, the Constitution was changed to actually remove council applications and ADL applications from automatically going to committee. I believe it's the last administration actually done that during their term of office. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am at all. We will be looking at further alterations to the Constitution as time goes by to make sure we actually pick up any anomalies. But rather than just coming straight to a full council meeting debated in the future, the chairman of the Planning Committee has agreed to have a standing item on every agenda to look at planning policy and planning procedures. So we pick these up early on and bring these through the council if we need to make any changes. So I think we're covering every single angle at the moment to ensure that members, when they see something's wrong, they can quickly relate it and quickly put it into perspective and bring it back to my attention so we can actually deal with a full council meeting if need be. I think I've probably said enough, Chairman. I think it's been well debated tonight, and I hope people will support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ball. So I'm moving to the vote now. So how we're going to do this again is how we normally do it. We're going to presume that the majority are in favour of the motion as as moved and seconded. The substantive unchanged. So I think we all know what it is, although there was those comments from Councillor Ball at the very beginning of what he moved, yeah, which is slightly different from the papers, I believe, yeah. And then, so the presumption will be that the majority are in favour. So I'll ask those who are against or abstaining to type in to the chat, please, or make it known to Joe otherwise through other means. So those against or abstaining, please. No, I've got no. I'm only pausing. I'm only pausing.
I'm not seeing anything.
I'm not seeing anything. So I'm working on the. Unless I've got this wrong, please shout if I have. But I'm working on the assumption that that is unanimous.
I agree.
Okay.
I see no votes against or no abstentions.
Against, no. So that is unanimously passed. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for that item. So next item on the agenda, everyone, is the ecological emergency. I'd like to invite Councillor Jess David, please, to move the recommendations. Is she there?
Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you, Chair.
no, that's fine.
Thank you. So in March 2019, this authority declared a climate emergency and set a target to become carbon neutral by 2030, recognising the severe impacts on human life from climate change. This was an important step, and our corporate strategy now includes the core policy of tackling the climate and nature emergencies. The motion that is before us now fully recognises the second part of the challenge we face, the ecological emergency. This is characterised by species extinction, loss of habitat, decline in the pollinators that are crucial to food supply, and decline in the health and quality of soil. Like the climate emergency, the ecological emergency is both a global and a local problem. The UK's nature is in serious trouble. The UK's State of Nature 2019 report highlighted the critical decline in biodiversity in the UK. Its headline finding was that both the abundance and distribution of UK species have declined since 1970. So to put it bluntly, there is less nature and in fewer places. The Avon Wildlife Trust supports this declaration and agrees that urgent action is needed to halt accelerating declines in wildlife and to restore the natural systems on which life on Earth depends. The State of Nature report made particularly sobering reading with regard to invertebrates, including moths, butterflies, ladybirds and beetles, and this group of insects have all declined between 65 to 70% over recent decades. There is also growing evidence that the diversity of species is in decline. To quote Bug Life, a small number of unfussy, very mobile and pollutant-tolerant species are able to cope with the damage that humans are doing to the planet, and these generalist species are replacing the rich diversity that make up the fabric of life on Earth. Having recently had the opportunity to read an encyclopedia of bugs with my 4-year-old son, this has given me a basic sense of the scale of destruction that we are possibly witnessing in our lifetime, and I don't want the pages of this book to become irrelevant. So the key factors driving this change have been more intensive farming, climate change, urbanisation and pollution. And why does this matter? Well, I think we all value nature, its beauty and its biodiversity. Many of us will have had more time during the lockdown period to walk in the countryside and to appreciate what we have. And we're truly lucky to live in such beautiful surroundings. But more fundamentally, the survival of our society and economy depends absolutely on the health of the natural environment and the benefits it provides. Clean water, air, food, timber, flood protection, and mental and physical health and well-being. For these reasons, I hope that this motion will attract cross-party support this evening. And I thank Paul May for his role in bringing this to us. Climate change also gives us a pressing reason to act. Both the IPCC and the UK's Climate Change Committee make clear that whilst reducing carbon emissions from fossil fuels is a top priority, we must also increase carbon absorption by the natural environment, by, for example, tree planting or different methods of land management. We have a long and strong history of work on biodiversity, landscape and ecology in BAMES, including a range of strategies, partnerships and projects that are delivering action related to the ecological emergency. But what is needed now is determination to reverse the trend of decline that we have seen over the last 50 years and to move towards habitat restoration and nature recovery in all that we do. Declaring this emergency won't change things overnight, but it is an important marker and commitment of our intentions to act urgently. We can make small but important changes, like changing our grass cutting regime to increase areas for long grass and wildflowers that attract pollinators through our Let's Get Buzzing initiative. But we must also look at the bigger picture, fully valuing the benefits that our natural environment provide and ensuring this is properly factored into our long-term strategies and decision making. So in particular, this motion recognises that we must promote our existing core policy of tackling the climate and nature emergency in all that we do, working alone and also in partnership with others. Crucially, in our planning role, ensure that we deliver biodiversity and environmental enrichment and resist the destruction of habitat. And a key part of this will be our work on the local plan partial review, looking at how we can increase the percentage of biodiversity net gain beyond that required by the new Environment Bill. And to be clear, this isn't about slowing down development through additional newt counting requirements. Rather, it is about showing leadership and a vision for local development that sets out to improve our natural environment. We will also review our green infrastructure strategy and use this as a nature emergency delivery framework. We will ensure our targets are promoted through local and regional partnerships and embedded in delivery projects such as Bathscape and Waterspace. We will also identify new areas for habitat restoration and produce a new tree and woodland strategy. So in summary, I urge colleagues across parties to support this motion that will further compel our authority to serious action to improve and enrich our local environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. I've got Councillor Paul May, I believe, to second.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to second this Liberal Democrat motion. Others have and will talk about the technicalities. It's a 22-item long motion, so it's fairly complicated. So I'm going to just try and put a bit of a practical picture on it if I can. I'm fortunate, I live in the country adjacent to a 250-acre Avon wildlife site. We've seen more people in total in the last 14 weeks than we have done in the last 40 years walking in the countryside. COVID-19 has reawakened the value of the mental health and well-being of people that the countryside generates. We should not take the natural habitat for granted nor harm it. Indeed, learning from the climate emergency, we have seen the power of education of the younger generation that they can achieve and make leadership. But locally, we've seen abuse by a small minority due to the lack of knowledge and things like noise, food, litter, gates being left open, dogs running in fields. So I think there is a need for us to make sure that we think about how we teach and develop learning about the environment. Ecology is more than nature. It relates to how animals, insects, plants coexist and interact. When you add the human beings into that equation, the end result can have unexpected ways of being harmful. Housing development changes the balance, so we need to think how we can harness support for the ecology with the needs of people and their own well-being. The climate emergency debate is about the big picture, but this emergency is about our influence on smaller habitats and how they can contribute to the big picture. So I think there's three things in summary that I'd like to say. This is something we can deliver and make a difference. The health and well-being of our residents can be enhanced by this, and we need to think about the educational implications to deliver leadership in the future. And thank Councillor Warren for the way that she's worked with everybody on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. I've got a list of speakers here, so I'll just run through the names first. I've got Councillor Warren, Councillor Walker, Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Crossley. So I've got Councillor Warren first, please.
Hi, councillors. You've all heard that wildlife is in trouble. We live in the Anthropocene period, the Earth's sixth mass extinction event, caused by a combination of human-induced global heating with our other activities like habitat destruction, devastation of the oceans, waterways and atmosphere through pollution and industrial farming. This is sad because nature is beautiful, but why else does it matter? The natural world is our life support system, providing our oxygen, water, food, and waste disposal through the entirety of the complex web of life. Take pollination, for instance, as just one example of the range of ecosystem services we receive for free from nature. The range of our wild bumblebee has contracted since the 1990s from the whole of the UK to just the northern and western Isles of Scotland. Over the same period, we have seen the rise of colony collapse disorder in domestic honeybees throughout Europe and North America, resulting in frequent colony death over winter. Why is this happening? Land use change means our bee is exposed to a more limited range of flowers. Global heating has altered the timings of flowering, meaning she and her forage plant may not coincide in time, so her diet is poor. This reduces our bees' ability to cope with both toxins and pathogens. Human movements of honeybees have brought new parasites, like the varroa mite, to our shores, exposing our bee to new diseases. Meanwhile, monotonous forage from green deserts, from arable farms to closely grazed pasture to manicured golf courses, means she is inevitably exposed to insecticide, reducing her resistance to parasites and pathogens, whilst fungicides combine with insecticides to increase their toxicity. It's a perfect storm. So just how many human food crops depend on insect pollinators? Estimates range from 33 to 75%. Interactions between pollinator and forage plant are very complex, and not all are fully understood. But imagine life without melons, apples, plums, almonds, peas, or beans. And of all the ecosystem services, I've only had time to talk about pollination. Now the natural world is really good at surviving, at bouncing back from all kinds of setbacks. But if we damage too many parts of our ecosystem at once, there's a risk we may push the pendulum too far and it may snap. Biodiversity is our insurance mechanism, allowing equilibrium to be restored in changing conditions. It's for these reasons that I want to thank Councillors David and May for working so closely with me to bring this motion, explicitly declaring an ecological emergency as distinct from the climate emergency. And I would ask all councillor colleagues from all parties not only to support it, but then to work unceasingly to bring all council policies into line to ensure this motion delivers more than just warm words. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren, for that. Councillor Walker next.
Thank you. I will be supporting this motion. While we were in lockdown, we managed to enjoy the natural beauty out there. Pollution levels were at a low and people enjoyed our beautiful countryside. But as we get back to the new norm, as a community, we need to be doing more to address the species extinction, loss of habitat, plus soil quality and quantity. Appropriate areas for habitat restoration within Bath and North East Somerset also need to be identified, along with more space for trees, planting and more education in schools about ecology, biodiversity and the importance of looking after our natural habitat. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting to see the Liberal Democrats take off from where the Labour group started with its motion on having a strategy for tree planting, and from where the Labour-controlled Bristol Council started by declaring an ecological emergency in February. So we support this administration with its renewed commitment to the ecology of North East Somerset and, of course, Bath. As a council, one of our greatest ecological assets is in the rural brilliance of North East Somerset. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was showing Miriam from Summer Valley Rediscovered around a few areas in Poulton where the local ecology has actually improved. We walked through the fields next to Poulton Batch, where the farmer has let last year's rape crop reseed itself with no cultivation of the land. And it demonstrated so clearly the impact that the simplest measure can make. We were amazed at the amount of wildflowers, grasses, butterflies and insects that we could see and hear. We even had the fortune to stumble across a jaybird feather on the ground, which has become a rare treat in recent years, and witnessed a bold yellowhammer singing its distinct song. Interestingly enough, it's actually one of the few British birds to have its song transcribed into words, which is great when writing something like this because I can include it. A little bit of bread and no cheese. And I can get away with that. But that might be a bit of fun. But what isn't fun is the very real threats to the ecology across North East Somerset and Bath. I would have liked to see this council acknowledge that one of the most important parts of fighting an ecological emergency is in our rural towns and villages. Bath will not do will do its part in fighting this emergency for us, and it may be vocal in the charge to declare the ecological emergency. But it is North East Somerset that needs to be where this council makes its biggest investment. We also need to make sure that this motion represents deeds rather than words, because we don't want another fiasco like the one we had with the gas generators in Midsummer Norton. We need immediate action that is specific, measurable, and time-bound. We need to have a council that recognises the commitments it is making and holds itself to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I've got Councillor Crossley next, then Councillor Jackson, and I've drawn a line then. So Councillor Crossley first, please.
Well, after some of the rubbish we've just heard, I don't know what to say. What I'd like to point out is some of the things that we're doing within parks. We inherited in our first year of administration a very interesting scheme on grass cutting and let's get Bath buzzing, as it was called then. So the grass cutting, we already implemented that last year, and we're in the second year of it, and that has already providing quite dramatic improvements in the diversity that we've got in our grass cutting across the whole of Bath and North East Somerset. It only seems to be Councillor Johnson that seems to think things only happen in Bath. This grass cutting is going on. The changes are everywhere, and we've extended out the Get Bath Buzzing to it's just let's get buzzing, and so that is going on across the whole of Baines, and that is about improving and encouraging diversity everywhere. Another thing that we've just started doing, and this again is across the whole of Baines, is we haven't renewed something called our glyphosate contract for spraying weeds in pavements and gutters. So this is something that is quite controversial, and by not using it, we are getting more, and let's not call them weeds, let's call them wildflowers and wild plants. So in one street, I've had one lady phone me up and she said with this year's policy, she's now got 21 and counting grass and flower seeds that she's got outside her front door in the pavements and gutters. But it does mean that when people complain that the council is making every place look untidy, you then have to say, well, actually, no, we are fighting the ecological climate. We want these flowers and wild plants everywhere, in order that we can get the diversity of insects that we need. If the only option to glyphosate is actually for people to start hoeing outside their things, and I already hoe the pavement, the gutter outside my house. So we need to encourage people to work with us on this project, and to do that, we need their help, because the council can't go around weeding everywhere if we're not using systemic weed killers such as glyphosate, which we have stopped using this year.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. I've got Councillor Jackson, the last speaker, please.
Well, fortunately, you don't need any strong chemicals.
Eleanor, you're breaking up.
Ragwort, and to children, he's like it. Oh, I don't know what I can do about that.
A little bit closer to the mic. Yes, yeah, a little bit closer to the mic might help.
Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Right, sorry. I'm urging everybody to take a common sense view, remove ragwort whenever they see it, or notify the council, and to keep Japanese knotweed under control. But the main thing I wanted to say is I hope that in consequence of this debate, everyone will support the extension of allotments, because they're the best ecosystems I can think of. I've got a hedgehog on mine. And secondly, to give full support to Bath in Bloom, Bradstock in Bloom, Keynsham in Bloom, and all these great groups of volunteers who do so much to keep our ecology in Bath and North East Somerset as healthy and as varied and diverse as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Councillor Jess David, to sum up, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So thank you, colleagues, for your contributions. And I think it's a really good outcome for our local environment that we've all offered such strong support for the motion this evening. I wanted to particularly reassure Councillor Johnson that the intention of this motion and the actions in it apply absolutely to North East Somerset. This is not a Bath-centric motion by any means. And it also will translate into real action as is set out in the motion itself. And I think one of the most important areas that we can all work on and contribute to is the review of our local plan. So thank you everyone, and also particularly to Councillor Crossley for setting out the work that we're already doing in our maintenance regime.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. So from what I've heard, there's a majority in favour of this motion by the sounds of it. Can I ask whether anyone is against or abstaining, and to make that clear either in the chat, please? I think it's a okay, so Joe, I've not had any notification of any against or abstaining.
I would agree with you. It looks like it's unanimous.
Unanimous. That's passed unanimously. Thank you ever so much, everyone, and well done. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 12. That's the Labour motion on community contribution. Can I ask Councillor Moss to move the recommendations, please?
Thank you very much. And first of all, can I thank Sarah Petition for the work that she's done on this motion and the research that she did on the Westminster scheme and how we use that as a basis for this motion. We all know that we're facing a severe financial challenge. That was the case prior to COVID. The situation has obviously got worse. I think we all have to look at all options and opportunities. And clearly Westminster Council have picked up on a scheme where it's looking at those properties with the highest values contributing to the local communities on a voluntary basis. And I'll highlight three elements. First of all, that council tax was initially intended to reflect property values as a form of local taxation, but that was on the basis of valuations done in the early 90s, and certainly the valuations at higher levels just do not reflect and haven't kept up with the reality of house prices. Secondly, that I think it's a real opportunity for local residents to have a say in what they see as priorities for the council through a trust. And of course, the third highlight is any opportunity we get to help with council finances is one that we should grab. But can I say that this motion is also not a number of things? First of all, it can't be a substitute for a well overdue reappraisal and reevaluation of properties for council tax. It's getting on for 30 years ago, and quite clearly Band A, which is for properties that cost under £40,000 at the particular point in time, is clearly out of date. It's also not a substitute for reform of the major part of local government funding, which is social care provision. Over 70% of our money is spent on that. And the cross-party agreement for the Dilnot report to be implemented on social care is overdue if we're going to look at local government finance. And it's certainly not a substitute for a proper central government funding of local government, not the current piecemeal announcements that we get very late. But it does have a value in itself, setting up a charitable trust that involves local residents and local residents' priorities. And clearly at the moment, any opportunity we get to help support our services is one we should take, and I'd recommend it to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. I believe I've got a seconder, which is Councillor Winston Duguid. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the motion as a progressive move. As recently as early March of this year, BMG, a national polling organisation, conducted a survey for the Independent newspaper about how tax should be raised for public services and investment. There was overwhelming support for raising tax through wealth rather than income or consumption. Specifically, there was 62% support for a new higher council tax ban for properties worth over £1 million, and only 15% opposed. On a regional basis, support was strongest in the North East and the West Country, at 73% with just 10% against. In the absence of central government action, this motion is more than a useful starter. By being voluntary, it also recognises that some elderly residents may be high net worth, but not necessarily cash rich. It empowers the individual to make the decision according to their household liquidity. I'm pleased to second.
Councillor Doggett, thank you very much. I've got some speakers now. I've got Councillor Evans first, then Councillor Samuel. So Michael Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me if I disappear. I've got a very dodgy. We know that council tax is not a tax which is very strongly associated with the ability to pay it. It's obviously introduced because there's no running away from it. The property is indubitably where it is and owned by who it is. So we've got a tenuous connection between the ability to pay and the tax which is attempted to be. This is particularly so in this case, where we're trying to ask for a charitable contribution from a certain category of council taxpayer, and we're taking advantage of the list we got of these people to basically appeal to them. We know that where charitable calls are made, vulnerable, suggestible people are frequently worried, wish to sometimes contribute. There was a tragic case in Bristol of an elderly lady, which you probably remember. So if this idea goes through, I do appeal to those who draw it up to be very, very careful in the way which they word this charitable appeal to a certain category of our taxpayers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Thank you. I've got Councillor Richard Samuel next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'd like to lend our support to this motion. I think that there are a lot of questions, such as the ones Councillor Evans has just referred to, but the principle of voluntary contribution above and beyond the legal position is one that is worth exploring. So what I would like to say to the meeting tonight is that I hope that we can agree to refer this to the Corporate Policy Development Scrutiny Panel, that they can look at this very closely and bring a report back to the Cabinet, which we will take very seriously. Obviously, timing is everything with this. I'm not sure how quickly that work can be done, but if it is to be done in advance of the budget setting for next year, obviously it will have to be quite quick. Otherwise you lose a year. But I think I welcome the initiative of the Labour Group in bringing this forward. Westminster is obviously a very different council to Bath and North East Somerset, but it is worth looking at the ideas and then debating them further. So I welcome this proposal, this motion, and I hope my colleagues will support that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Samuel. Now, I've got no more speakers. I'd like to go back to the original mover of the motion, please, Councillor Moss, and then we move to a vote. So, Councillor Moss, please.
I think very briefly, first of all to Richard, thank you for the support of the administration. We tried not to be overly prescriptive in the way this motion was put together, because we know that the devil is always in the detail, and look forward to the work being done through scrutiny on it. And to Michael, I think you raise a good point with the of how you make sure you don't over pressurize people. I think first of all the confidentiality, but also looking at good practice guides on collection is important. And I'm not sure if I'm agreeing with you or reflecting your point about this is a property tax, because the one thing about a property tax, it can't be shipped overseas or can be avoided. So in that sense, it's it's a useful way of collecting taxation. But thank you for the support.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Well, from the indication from the speakers that there's obviously a willingness to support this. So I'll take that as the majority view to support this motion. Can I ask any of those who are against or abstaining to make their view clear, please? Okay, I've received nothing. Joe, have you? Yep. Back.
There is one vote against.
Yeah, we're getting some votes in. Yeah, so we've got 1 against, 2 against,
Yeah.
3, 4. There's probably a few more. We'll wait a second. Let them filter through. Apologies to everyone. Just let that. So I've currently got 4 against, no abstentions, but obviously the majority are in favour. So that passes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 4 against and 54 in favour.
Yeah,
So
that's it. Lovely.
Carried.
Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, before we move on to the next item, everyone, I'd just like another 5-minute comfort break to get the circulation moving. Just worried about you all sitting down all evening, you know. And it will be again 5 minutes and no more. Thank you very much. See you in 5. Mike, are we all back? Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. Good, stretch your legs. Right, so item 13, I am unmuted, aren't I? Yeah. Item 13 on the agenda, Labour motion, Black Lives Matter. So can I invite Councillor Johnson to move the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to move this motion. The death of George Floyd has led to a justified outpouring of anger and grief, giving the world a rare moment of reflection on the racism that still exists around the world, and the Labour group feels that this council needs to respond. We have all seen firsthand the racism that still exists in its minority, and also the unchallenged nature with which it is sometimes accepted as just an everyday part of life. That is not okay. And the structural mechanisms that allow this to manifest itself into our society is what needs to be brought down, because change needs to happen. We should be looking at the culture of the council first, and it's great to see that the council has already recognised that it needs to do things differently. With the equalities decisions it has committed itself to make, but this motion is about more than that. I recently read a brilliant line wrote by the rap artist Tupac, who said, "The seed must grow regardless of the fact it's planted in stone." And I think that's an excellent way of looking at the issues with structural racism. We all need to grow as individuals, but the barriers that are presented to our Black community and all people of colour in the UK stops them achieving their full potential. I think we can all agree, if everyone has the same potential, the same opportunities, and the same chances regardless of their race, then society will be all the better for it. This motion intends to allow our Black community and all people of colour to have their own say, their own voice on what happens next. And this is going to happen by establishing a race equalities panel. As a white male councillor, I'm fully aware of my own privilege. But how I choose to use that privilege is by being an ally to all Black people and the Black Lives Matter movement. We need independent voices to ensure that the views of all residents are heard. Sometimes that means listening to things that might be uncomfortable for this council to hear. But the uncomfortable truth is that we aren't the most diverse authority in the UK, and we use that as a way of not taking equality issues as seriously as we should. We need to stand up and support communities, no matter how small, and ensure they are not left behind. If I can finish with just one more quote, because I do like a quote, it's from Martin Luther King, and is that the time is always right to do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I've got Councillor Dr. Kumar to second, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I extremely strongly, passionately, and empathetically support this motion. Racism remains a sinful aspect of our town and elsewhere, and must be confronted. It remains sinful aspect of our schools, here in Bath, and our colleges, and our universities, and our institutes. I'm not talking about a historical narrative from the past, Mr. Chair. I'm not talking about an old story of medieval period. I'm talking about present. I have myself seen many people who are made to believe, who are made to feel that they do not belong here. Last year I was told when helping my own residents, and I was shouted, "Go back! Go back to your country! Brexit has happened! Go back to which country, Chair?" For me, for my family, Bath is our town. This is our country. And Chair, this was not an isolated incident. 5 years ago, when I was helping another resident in Lambridge, where Councillor Appleward was also meeting residents in another street, a woman shouted at me, and when I was with a Chinese friend, they said, "Go back. Do not make Bath Leicester, or do not make it Manchester." 13 years ago, when my wife came, she was discriminated by a corporate conglomerate. We took them to the court, and they had to pay a compensation for indirect racial discrimination, and they had to pay 3,000.
1 minute.
Chair, I would like to live in a world where there is just one race, the human race. Chair, bark is beautiful. Bark is beautiful not only because of colorful gardens and flowers, but because of colorful people it has. I know I have less time. I wish I had more time, but I will abide by that. And finally, I will quote Martin Luther King, the Jr., and end with a positive note. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe, and I firmly believe, that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Will have the final word, madam, and that's my final word here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Thank you. Well, you know, I fully recognise the passion, and but sometimes shouting into the microphone actually means that you can't hear very well. But I think we've got the gist of all that. So well done. Thank you. I've got on the table an amendment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Councillor Walker, do you have an amendment coming forward?
Yes, I do, Chair. So I wish to talk to the independent amendment which is tabled before you, which I hope you've all seen. We, the independent councillors, recognise there is a need to make a stand against all forms of racism and discrimination. We feel that the Labour group's motion as it stands is aimed at the global issues rather than focusing on Bath and North East Somerset. We feel it is important to recognise the significant work already undertaken by North and East Somerset relating to equalities. As councillors elected to represent Bath and North East Somerset Council, we feel that our first efforts and resources should primarily be focused to this cause. We feel that our amendment is more relevant to Bath and North East Somerset as it recognises the huge amount of work that's already been undertaken, and hope that our amendment will be accepted. We look forward to working with everyone to move these issues forward within Bath and North East Somerset. We fully appreciate there is no place within society for any form of racism or discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I've got, do we have a seconder for that at all, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that. Yeah.
Councillor Myers, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, please go ahead, Councillor Myers.
Right. No one who cares about this country can ignore the many thousands of people who have joined the Black Lives Matter movement in recent days. Racism in any form is pernicious and abhorrent. Oppression and enslavement of minority or weaker groups has been prevalent throughout the centuries, and sadly and shamefully, it's still evident across the globe today. Although legislation has been brought forward to provide official protection and rights, some people, due to their colour, race or beliefs, still experience prejudice and discrimination. The Conservative group are against all aspects of discrimination, whether on race, sex, orientation, age, disability, or any other minority group that requires support to achieve their best out of life. We therefore support the independent amendment because it's more comprehensive. Here tonight, whilst we can't change the entire world, we can and must work together to play our part for residents and visitors alike in Bath and North East Somerset. The Prime Minister's announced the government is setting up a cross-governmental commission to look at all aspects of inequality in employment, in health outcomes, in academic and all walks of life. The aim of the commission is to set out a new positive agenda for change, balancing the needs of individuals, communities and society, maximising opportunities and ensuring fairness to all. It will build on the work of the Race Disparity Unit, but will go further to understand why disparities exist, what works, what doesn't, and present recommendations for action across government and other policies. We here have a duty as councillors to respect all residents, irrespective of their colour, race or creed, and my colleagues and I in the Conservative group wish to confirm our determination to drive out any oppression and racism of our residents or visitors to our area. This is a message which we believe we should shout from the rooftops. The Conservative group are therefore pleased to second the independent amendment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. So I've got an amendment on the table that's been moved and seconded. I've got a list of speakers. Now, in the order was Dina Romero, Councillor Jackson, Robin Moss, Matt McCabe. So I'm assuming that they're all on the amendment. So I'll take Councillor Romero first, please.
Chair, I believe you need to ask whether or not the mover of the motion accepts the amendment.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I forgot that. Yes, you're quite right. So, Councillor Johnson, do you accept that amendment or not?
Absolutely not. It completely misses the point on so many levels.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. So, yes, so we do have an amendment on the table. Apologies for that. We do have an amendment on the table. So, Councillor Romero?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and the Liberal Democrat Party won't be supporting the amendment either. I don't think it adds anything to the motion, and I believe it actually waters it down in some ways. So, let's go back to where this started most recently. George Floyd was killed because he was deemed more likely to have done wrong simply because of the colour of his skin. His life was considered expendable. That cannot be right. I appreciate that we are fortunate here that racism is less common in Bath and North East Somerset, but as Dr. Kumar has pointed out, it does exist here. Bath MP Vera Hobhouse hosted a conference where Bath residents spoke of their own experiences. Students in Bath have also experienced racism. Some with Asian heritage were blamed for the coronavirus outbreak. We are community leaders, so we need to show that such behaviour is not acceptable. I have appointed Dr. Kumar to be the Council's advocate on BME issues, and we have been looking at a number of areas where we already know the Council could do better. One area is in training. We believe that we should have mandatory training in equalities for all those in public-facing roles, including for councillors. Inequality exists even when we don't expect to see it. Discrimination and unconscious bias exist in plain sight. We need to do better. We need to recognise that it isn't okay not to notice difference. We need to acknowledge that differences make a difference and do something about it. There is much more that should be done, and some of those options are covered in the motion. So I urge all to support the motion as it is written and to reject the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. Councillor Jackson next, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I find the argument behind this amendment very difficult to understand, because what in fact it is doing is emasculating our motion to make it clear that Black Lives Matter in Bath and North East Somerset. And more to the point, it undermines our own individual responsibility, both for our own conduct and for that of the council. If anything has got home to us in the COVID-19 emergency, it should be this, that we are each responsible for our own health, and the way we behave matters. And racism, for me, is an insidious cancer eating away at our society. It's the individual experiences which count, apart from this great need to remove any systematic or institutionalist racism. It's difficult, I think, for white middle-class people like myself to understand the shock and the hurt of racist action. I had a colleague at the University of Derby, a bright young professor in information technology and communication, who shocked me by the account of the number of times the police stopped him, a well-dressed, well-educated person driving a very nice car. You almost wondered if it was just some sort of jealousy. I also had the privilege, when I started teaching African religious traditions as a way of countering racism by a positive understanding of the cultural and theological inheritance of Black people, I had the privilege of teaching Frida Burton, who took on De Vere hotels when she was only 15 because of the appalling racist abuse she had suffered from Bernard Manning. Sorry?
1 minute.
Can you not hear me? 1 minute, right. So what I'm urging everybody to do is to vote for the substantive and against the amendment because of the kind of hurt, psychological, spiritual, and in many different ways that this kind of discrimination creates. Black lives make a great contribution to society, and their religious experience is of great value to us, and we all need to be in solidarity. And I think it's very regrettable that we won't apparently have a unanimous vote of council on our motion. But I appeal to you to reject the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Moss, please.
Thank you again, speaking against the amendment, and I want to pick up 4 particular parts of the amendment. First of all, when Karen was moving the amendment, she focused very much on the need to focus on Bath and North East Somerset. So I find it slightly odd that the one mention of Bath and North East Somerset, which is in paragraph 5, is a line that they intend to, are looking to delete. The second part is looking at establishing a race equality panel. Actually, it's not establishing, it would be re-establishing. Bath used to have its own race equality council. It eventually withered away because of lack of funding, and it is absolutely important, vital, that you have an independent voice for communities to be able to speak to the council and to be able to speak for themselves. It's not simply enough to do that internally. I suppose the controversial bit is in 6, where they want to add within legal and democratic means. And in one way, I get that. But let's remind ourselves that there are many people here in this meeting, women councillors, who would not be here if the suffragettes had not broken the law, that we have seen with the Tolpuddle Martyrs breaking the law on behalf of trade unions, the Levellers, and of course leaders like Martin Luther King and Jr. And Nelson Mandela. Quite often the laws at a particular period of time would be embarrassed by future generations. And I can also use the example of protests against restrictive laws against gay people in the country that for many of our lifetimes that were withdrawn. But I think the important element of the
1 minute.
of this amendment is in paragraph 7, to play its part in working to address deep-seated inequalities. And I think the fact that this amendment looks to delete deep-seated says to me, I'm afraid, that neither the independent group nor the Conservative group actually get it. They don't actually understand that racism is a real deep-seated problem in Bath and North East Somerset and in the UK as a whole. And I urge you all to vote against this amendment that waters down an important resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Now I've got Councillor McCabe on the amendment, please.
Yes, I had the same reservations particularly about the removal of the words Bath and North East Somerset from this amendment. In this amendment, we are Bath and North East Somerset Council. That's the area we have control over. That's the area we need to focus on. And I find it quite horrifying that it should be suggested that we shouldn't. I was an art student as a youngster, and I used to get stopped quite regularly by the police. At no time did I have to work out a strategy for surviving the encounter, and that's because I'm white. But forget what I have to say. You've heard from Dr. Kumar. If you want to hear more stories about what it was like growing up in Bath as a black person, then go onto Vera Hobhouse's website, look at Black Lives in Bath, and those are real people telling you what it's really like, what an unprovoked racist attack can throw you through a glass plate window. You did nothing wrong other than you had the wrong colour skin at that point. So I'm definitely against this amendment, but I'm fully supportive of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I've got Councillor Ryan Wills, and then I'll be going back to the mover of the original motion, yeah, which is the flow chart I have. So there's no sort of factual coming back to you, Karen. I think that's what the flow chart says, unless there's something that obviously is burning. I don't want to exclude, but Councillor Ryan Wills, please.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Labour Group for bringing this very important motion to Council. So I think it is of paramount importance that we do absolutely everything we can to tackle racism and achieve racial equality. And on that note of doing everything we can, does this amendment do this? No, it doesn't. What this amendment does is it waters down the motion, and this would result in the Council doing the bare minimum to tackle racism. Now, okay, Baines may not be the very worst area for racism, but that doesn't mean it's not an issue. Of course, it is still a huge issue, as raised by Councillor Kumar. What we need to ask ourselves is, have we achieved racial equality? No, absolutely not. We need to do everything we can to tackle racial issues. And for that reason, I would urge everyone to reject this amendment and approve the original motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wills. Now back to the so we're on the amendment, but I get the mover of the original motion to sum up before we vote. So that's Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to see a lot of support for this motion. It really does mean a lot to me. I think I was going to make a couple of points, but they have been brought up. I mean, the fact that Councillor Walker preached about this being relevant to Bath and North East Somerset, and then their amendment actually excludes Bath and North East Somerset from our motion is slightly peculiar. I also, so thanks to Councillor Moss for pointing that out. I also wanted to just add to the point of the inclusion of legal and demographic, and I totally agree with Councillor Moss in the way he summed that up quite eloquently. And for me as a gay man, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a black trans woman from New York who threw the first brick at Stonewall. So I think we have to be careful with how we use and choose words, and I think the original motion it does a lot, and yes, I can't say any more than that.
Okay, thank you. No, much appreciated. Thank you very much. So on the amendment, we've got it moved, seconded, we've debated. We're all, by listening to all of the views, it sounds like the majority view is against the amendment. So any of those who wish to vote for or abstain, can you make your views clear, please? We've got some votes coming in. There's quite a few coming in, so so we need to be clear here, Joe, about the numbers, because if we're close to 50-50, when we'll have a roll call.
Yes. So far we've got 14 votes. I'm just going to double check that. We've got 15 votes.
Chair, can Chair, I've put in 4 and I've on the wrong bit. I should have done it on the main, not the amendment. So I've made
the amendment. Yes, that's right. So okay,
erase that, please.
Okay, Councillor Hedges is removing his.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, so another vote's come in. So
okay, we have 15 votes for the amendment.
Okay, so the amendment falls. You concur with that, Joe?
I do concur with that. Yes,
Yeah.
I think it clearly does fall. Yes, Robin's just added a comment there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So and a comment's been added in, considering how difficult this is, and that people might change their voting intention on the substantive. So we go back to the substantive. I've got no speakers on the substantive. Yeah. Although the debate is open now on the substantive. Yeah, there's some comments here that somebody accidentally voted twice, but that doesn't change the result that we've just had on the amendment, okay?
Correct.
So, okay, just so that it's not the easiest thing to do. All this I fully accept. So, okay, so I've got Councillor Hurst on the substantive, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think this is a really important motion. I don't want to repeat what's already been said about the issues, but I want to take the opportunity to really plead to the people that voted for the amendment to still consider voting for the motion as a whole, because I think it's really important this council is seen to be taking a really strong voice against racism, and that we stand up and we really work hard with our area of opportunity, and are reaching particularly into the police committees that we have representations on, to really try and see whether we can make a difference. So I want to urge people to vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I've got a few speakers here. So I've got Councillor Hedges and Councillor Watt. Councillor Hedges, did you want to speak, or was it finger trouble?
Chair.
Okay, carry on. And then I've got Councillor Watt after that.
Okay, I mean, firstly, I want to say you only have to remember what Dr. Schumer said, and how passionate he was, and the eloquent way he put it forward. I couldn't say it any better myself. I mean, I was brought up with black foster brothers and sisters, and I was amazed at the young age of 11. You'd be walking down the street, they talk to you and completely ignore your foster brother. I'm 150% behind this motion, Chair, and I urge everybody else to vote for it.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Hedges. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chair. I will be voting for the substantive motion, and it is, of course, of critical importance to recognise that it is the unconscious bias that is the hardest issue to deal with, and that exists throughout all sorts of systems. And it's not sufficient to say that this is a police issue. Actually, it goes right to the heart of all of our public services. We've been doing some work at work with our Black, Asian, minority ethnic cohort of staff, and we have a program in place where we're working together to support them and their families in dealing with this. And I was told of a story by one of our Black members of staff who applied for a job as a magistrate, and in the interview he was asked by somebody whether he had these are the exact words that were used. He said he was told he was very well spoken for a Black man, and he didn't get the job as a magistrate, but he came out of that interview imagining that it seemed like he was not Black enough to fit the quota they were clearly looking for, but clearly too Black to be able to consider the issues of the rural part of the area that he would have been a magistrate for, and that was a serving magistrate who's trying to be involved in an interview process and to improve the diversity of the bench. And it's that unconscious bias that is really important to try and work out of our systems. And it's not just about individual actions, it's also about the way that we design processes. And this doesn't just affect Black, Asian, minority ethnic people. It can affect poor people just in the same way. Every one of our council administration processes is designed by a well-meaning graduate who can read and write and navigate complex processes. The vast majority of the people who need to access our services are not well-educated, well-meaning graduates who can read very well and write very well, and they struggle with the complexity that we serve up to them. And it's really important to recognize that we don't understand sometimes that we're designing systems and processes that are simply inaccessible for sometimes the very people that they're intended and to serve.
Thank you for that. No, very well said, very well put. I think that will be picked up along the way, but well done. Councillor Warrington, next, please.
Yeah, so I'd just like to say that I will be supporting this. I was slightly uncomfortable with, in my opinion, a less broad outlook because I come from a mixed race family. I don't look like it. I have an English name, but I was married to an Egyptian, so I did have a married name, and I know that what that impact had. I didn't get the interviews when I used that name. So I do understand. I haven't experienced some of the awful racism that other people have, but I have witnessed my family from who are not white coming over and the expression on people's faces. So I do understand that. I would have liked this to have been broader because I think lots of different ethnic minorities suffer racism. And I think we should also remember that there are different forms of racism. Being perceived as an English person makes me extremely dull in comparison to my sort of technically exotic background. Which I don't find, which I find racist as well. So I will support this motion because we do have to do something to make things better. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Warrington. I've got a few more speakers coming in now. Then I'd like to draw a line. So I've got Councillor Shern, then Stevenson McGall, and then Ellen Jackson. I'd like to draw a line then, please. So. Councillor Shern, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I really support this motion. I remember starting school some 68 years ago with a young chap called Kenny Isles, whose dad was a GI from the Second World War and had to go, but was forced to go back to America and leave Kenny's mum and that, and we played football for the Somerset under-11s, and I always remember when we went down to Dorset, we played the Dorset under-11s, and they were not complimentary about Kenny Isles or his colour or anything else. And I can always remember that day the whole team got together and kicked the Dorset team off of the field sort of thing. I've never felt so proud in all my life of people sticking up for somebody like Kenny. Sadly, he died a few years ago, but I like to think that the life he led sort of thing and the people he touched throughout his life sort of that he got rid of a lot of the racism that was around at the time. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. Well said. Thank you. Councillor Stevenson McGall, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to say, obviously, I'm definitely supporting this. I actually grew up in Pakistan and went for about 4 years of my life when I was a child. And when we returned to rural South Devon, we were in our council house and we lived next door to a family of Vietnamese boat people who had come over just after the Vietnam War, coming out of the conflict there, and they were living next door to us. And the amount of racism that they received in the late 70s, early 80s in rural South Devon is one of the reasons why I wanted to get into politics. My family weren't involved in politics, no one I knew, etc. But I saw the inequality and the racism, the casual racism that people had towards them. And I just think it's important that all of us in this council chamber become advocates and allies of people whose skin colour isn't the same as our own. Everyone faces problems in life, but as one of the other speakers said, you know, you don't have to think about the escape mechanism if the police come and speak to you if you're white. You do sometimes if your colour of your skin is different, and that is why all of us need to redouble our efforts on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm voting tonight in favour of this motion in memory of one of my former students, Johnny Asani.
We've lost you there, Eleanor.
Murdered in Derby a few years, him through to a good class of degree. He couldn't get a job and he drifted into crime. And so for Johnny's sake, please vote for this motion.
Thank you very much. So back to Councillor Johnson, to sum up, please. And I know you've summed up once already, Councillor Johnson, so remember that.
Yeah, don't worry. I do remember very well, Chair. Thank you very much. I have nothing further to say, really. I do obviously plead with every member of this council to vote for this this motion. I think it's really, really important that we all stand together as a council on this one. And I've got nothing further to add than that.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, hearing everyone speak, I think there's a majority in favour of this. So those against or abstaining, can you make your views clear, please? Got one abstention coming through, Joe.
Yes.
Another. We'll give it a minute. There's a few going to trickle through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at the moment we've got 2 abstentions.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll take that as a given. So 2 abstentions, all the other votes for. So the Correct. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone, for that. Yeah?
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Agreed. Okay, item closed. Next item on the agenda, item 14, which is the Conservative and Independent motion on the 5-year financial plan. I believe Councillor Myers wants to say something first, please.
Yes. I'd like to raise a point of order. I wanted to do it at this point in order to keep the flow regarding the amendment to our motion by the Lib Dem. I was keen to get this out of the way at the start of the debate on this. So I wish to raise a query under Rule 4A of the Constitution, Part 36, on the amendment to our motion I'm about to introduce, on the basis that it's a substantial rewrite that negates the original motion. And can the council solicitor or the chief executive please explain their reasoning for allowing this motion under the Constitution?
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. We'll just we'll ask the monitoring officer what her view is on that, unless it's the chief executive's domain. But
the Constitution, it's Part 4A, Rule 36, says that if an amendment seeks to achieve something that is relevant but cannot be achieved by merely voting against the motion, it is likely to be ruled as a valid amendment. And this amendment does fall within that category and therefore has been ruled as a valid amendment. The meeting will be advised by the Chief Exec on the validity of amendments, and the ruling of the chair thereon will be final.
yes, thank you. Yes, so I've been informed that it's not a direct negative, and therefore I will allow the amendment to come forward in the time when we get to this point in the debate. Councillor Myers, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for raising it. Now, back to you again, Councillor Myers, for moving the item 14 motion, please.
Yeah. So as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, this council has in recent months faced the unprecedented financial catastrophe of losing 20% of its income. This is not, in our view, a loss that will simply be restored once things return to normal. There's going to be a new normal, a new world, and so as a council we must change and adapt, as hundreds of thousands of businesses and charities across the UK and the world in fact are doing. Despite the impact of COVID-19 being clear as early as February, when we were debating the budget, neither at that time nor during the intervening 4 to 5 months into the crisis will this administration recognise the imperative adopting a longer term planning horizon. So what are they doing? On the 2nd of July, Cabinet approved a coronavirus recovery plan in response to the crisis, with effectively a very short-term horizon to the end of March 2021. Despite repeated questioning of this approach from members, whilst we've had scrutiny debates and from across the chamber in previous debates for a longer-term approach to be adopted, the response has been, there is too much uncertainty at present time to plan beyond March. I find this attitude shocking and frankly irresponsible, as valuable time has been lost and is being lost. Long-term planning in a crisis enables you to be proactive rather than simply reactive. Of course we need short-term measures, but given the structural problems we're facing over parking, heritage and commercial estate income, we need a complete rethink considering the long term. I suspect that yet again this administration will simply dismiss what I'm saying tonight. So let's look at what other councils and organisations are doing. Wiltshire Council, for example, have put in a very comprehensive 5-year recovery plan, and they've looked at staffing and any officer directly not in a customer-facing role, their role and future employment's been considered as to what the council can afford. How different in Baines, where not just do we not have a long-term plan, but when the government announced more funding, the £2.8 million of staff cuts were instantly shelved for the year. So rather than using the money to invest in the future, vital investment, this administration is simply going to squander it, plugging a gap in staff costs, which will open up again wide in April next year. British Airways, companies like that, they're taking a long-term view and are retiring their 747 fleet early. I say to this administration, I appeal, we need a long-term plan as soon as possible. Please, please wake up. Please don't put it off for further month after month. We need to consider the long term properly now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I've got Councillor Blackburn to second, is that right?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair. When we all assembled,
Sorry, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. When we all assembled for the budget meeting earlier this year, there were storms ahead, but we still ploughed on with our plan, one that was out of date a few weeks later and effectively ripped up by COVID-19. When discussing the budget proposals with a fellow elected councillor who was about to attend their first budget meeting since being elected, I wasn't surprised to hear their amazement that we were looking at a one-year budget without any long-term notes and no backstory for the previous years. When my accountants are helping me review my last 12 months trading, we always look at the past 5 years, understand the oddities and their impacts, and try to ensure our plans take account of all we have learned over those years. I remember starting work in Bath 36 years ago in a retail store on Union Street and seeing my manager writing in a day book at the end of each trading day to record what had gone on. Bad weather, rugby matches, school holidays, whatever impacted or influenced the store's trading performance. He showed me that he'd always look back through previous years because targets and plans always have outside influences, and when making comparisons, we need to understand the past too. For those of you unfamiliar with normal business practice of planning and review, I'd like to suggest a light read that encapsulates our situation very well. Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. Things change, and being complacent and hoping things keep going well is a recipe for disaster. In 1998, Marks & Spencer became the first British retailer to make a pre-tax profit of over £1 billion, although subsequently it went to a sudden slump which took the company and its shareholders by surprise. We have three core income streams that I think we have taken for granted. We believe those monies will keep rolling in and forget they can be impacted. Well, they have, and we have all got to help to get us back on track, and try to do things in the same financial year is both impractical and I suggest impossible. We need a long-term vision to understand the potential changes to car parking revenues as we drive climate emergency changes into transport habits. We need to consider that millennials don't want to look at old stuff. They want experiences, and our heritage might not always appeal. And we need to understand that as a property holder, we cannot guarantee income when the world is changing around us, and retail especially is being impacted massively. I want us to show our residents that we can manage and manage well and steer the right path for the long-term well-being of our communities. We need to know our council plans, not just hear, of course we have a 5-year plan, because if we do, it should be transparent, shared with us and scrutinised so that we can do the job that we've been elected to do for our residents. I'm very happy to second this motion on behalf of the independent councillors, and I hope you can all see the positive reasons this has been brought before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Now, I understand there's a Labour amendment on the table. Councillor Moss to move a Labour amendment, is that correct?
Yes, it is as printed, and very quickly looking at the time, we believe that any recovery plan should not be impacted on those poorest in our society and Bath and North East Somerset, and also it should look to protect services. So very briefly and very quickly.
And do we have a seconder for that from Labour Group?
Yeah.
Councillor Hardman, yes.
Yeah. I'm pleased to second this amendment. Yes, I think we would agree that we need to commit to a long-term 5-year financial plan for combating the problems created by COVID-19, but we need to ensure the services for the most disadvantaged are protected. For example, these figures show that by May 2020, there had been a 75% increase in people claiming universal credit. This means many more children and families claiming benefits. There's also been an average increase of 124% in food bank usage. So bearing these figures in mind and how many of our residents have been very, very badly affected by the virus, we would say that we do need to make sure that vital services are protected for our disadvantaged residents. So I would urge you to support this amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. On the amendment, I've got one speaker at the moment, which is Councillor Samuel. So if you want to speak on the amendment, please make that clear. Councillor Samuel, please. Yeah.
Chair, sorry.
Oh yes, I've got to ask. You're quite right. You're quite every time, isn't it? I'm consistent. Right. Will Councillor Myers, will you accept the amendment?
Yes, I'm delighted to accept the amendment. And I think this underlines protecting the most vulnerable is a key element of having a longer term proper plan. So I'm very pleased to accept it.
Okay.
Okay, so that now becomes part of the substantive that's on the table that's been accepted. Yeah. I'm saying this all slowly just in case someone disagrees and I've got this wrong, but that becomes part of the substantive, yeah. And I do have so I have a speakers on the list, which is Councillor Samuel to speak on the. I've got another amendment. Sorry, I've got another amendment on the table, and that is Councillor Samuel's Liberal Democrat amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I was going to say I am going to move our own group's amendment. Perhaps we should take some advice about the incorporation of the Labour amendment into the substantive, but our amendment will still stand. So I'm going to propose that we vote against the Labour amendment now incorporated into the substantive motion, and that is for two very practical reasons. Currently, the council, and it has done for many years, uses a 3-year horizon in its medium-term financial planning. And that has been the case for many years, and that follows the guidance that CIPFA issued to local authorities about prudential management of finance. The reason they do this is that there is a fine balance between a realistic future view, the income and expenditure, that where the further away you get from the point of decision, the less reliable those figures become. In fact, they become highly speculative. Who in this chamber would possibly be able to say with any degree of confidence that in 5 years' time they could accurately predict what was going to happen? Anybody who says that is talking complete rubbish. It's not actually the case. So what we are going to do and what we propose is that we will be producing a medium-term financial strategy shortly. And when the budget report comes to council in February next year, there will be that 5-year view about the future that opposition members have referred to. This amendment and its incorporation into the substantive motion is entirely premature. Members of the opposition clearly don't know me well enough.
1 minute.
Thank you very much. Members of the opposition clearly don't know me well enough if they think that I would ignore the clear signals about our finances that the current COVID situation has created. I have absolutely no intention of letting the council's finances run away with itself, and that will not happen. So, Chairman, I will be encouraging members of our group to vote against both the substantive motion and the incorporated Labour amendment, and then we can move on to deal with our amendment, where I will lay out what we are going to do. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Salmon, just so you know, you've now moved. So you've moved your amendment. That's the Liberal Democrat amendment. That's correct, isn't it? That's what you've just done.
Chairman, I understood we were speaking on the substantive motion and its incorporation of the Labour amendment. So yeah, I have not yet spoken on our amendment.
Someone needs to move the Liberal Democrat amendment now.
I'm moving it.
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, me. Sorry, I tried to put myself in the chat.
Okay, so do you want to speak now? Yes, go ahead. On the Liberal Democrat amendment.
Do I not get asked if I accept it?
It's not seconded yet.
Sorry, yes it is.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yes. Will you accept that Liberal Democrat amendment, Councillor Myers?
No, I won't, because it still misses the point that we get a large amount of our income as a council from businesses. And
yes or no?
Okay. This is 30 years, you plan ahead 5 years all the time.
Okay. Thanks for that. So, Councillor Romero, you seconded, you've got the right to speak.
Thank you. I'm not actually certain that the original motion was really trying to be helpful. And certainly once it's, I fully endorse the sentiments behind the Labour's amendment to the original motion. And obviously we will seek to ensure that, any budget changes as they come forward, will not impact adversely on those that are least able to cope with those. But I was expecting Richard to actually have moved the motion more fully. But I think that it's suffice to say that we already have in place the next steps, and these are not new steps. These are the same processes that we've been using as a council for a number of years through a number of administrations. Obviously we will not be able to predict the future. We don't know whether there's going to be a second spike. We don't know what else is coming around the corner. But I think trying to change to a longer forecast seems quite inappropriate at this time, as I'm sure many will already know that we'll be starting work on next year's budget in September, as per usual. And therefore, that's my rationale for supporting the amendment, because we need to do things in the right order and not create sort of a view into the future that we cannot easily predict.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. Now, speakers on the Liberal Democrat amendment. Now, just so everyone remembers where we are, we've got a Conservative motion that was that where let's call it a Labour addendum was absorbed into it. Yeah, we've now got a Liberal Democrat amendment on the table, which has been moved and seconded, and that needs to be debated and voted on now. So I've got Councillor Watt to speak.
Thank you, Chair. On the Liberal Democrat amendment, I find it quite staggering that the Liberal Democrat administration sits in isolation in thinking that the pre-COVID structures and planning processes are sufficient to deal with such a crisis. It must be the only corporate body of a comparable size in the country, or indeed the world, that believes that the situation is still as it was, and that therefore the approaches are appropriate. 5 months ago, in the budget debate, we refused to support the budget because it paid no attention whatsoever to the coming crisis. The European Union last week published a COVID recovery plan 2021 to 2027. The idea that SIPFA's advice pre-COVID that you shouldn't produce more than a 3-year plan is frankly ludicrous. You've heard that our neighbouring council, Wiltshire County Council, already has a 5-year COVID recovery plan in place in detail and being delivered. And I would say to Councillor Samuels, the idea that our current way of doing things is perfectly fine, given the crisis that we're facing, is quite frankly ridiculous. Would you, and the idea that you cannot possibly know anything about the future, so therefore we'll do nothing about the present, is ridiculous. Would you stand in the dark in the face of a train tunnel on the basis that you would say, well, I'm not going to move because I don't know when the train might come out the tunnel, in the full knowledge that at some point a train's coming out the tunnel is going to run you over? No, of course you would not. There are lots and lots of things that are perfectly predictable, maybe not the precise day, maybe not the precise number, but there is much that is predictable about the impact that COVID-19 will have on the economy of Bath and North East Somerset. And it is simply, it is neglect of the most extraordinary form for the council, both in its corporate and its political body, to imagine that just we can swim along with the current planning processes and pay no recognition for the crisis that our residents, our businesses, and our local economy faces. It's quite staggering.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I've got Councillor Moss to speak on the Liberal Democrat amendment.
Thank you. I think this debate is disappointing. I think the Liberal Democrat amendment is disappointing because it repeats the statements that were made to Cabinet and to the last council, and doesn't actually pick up the challenge that is within this motion about a 5-year plan. And I actually disagree with the Conservatives and the Independents in the way they moved this, in saying, you know, you can plan 5 years ahead, because I don't actually believe that is wholly possible. But certainly with our internal structures and our service delivery, we can and should be looking at how we can deliver over 5 years, and how we can actually look at a green recovery and a green design. But the other half of that 5-year plan, and Richard is actually quite right about it, is that who knows where we're going to be on our income streams. And Bath and North East Somerset are virtually uniquely poorly placed in terms of our income and our income strategy over the next few years, as compared to Wiltshire, for example, who do not have the same commercial or tourism income as we have. And so I think it is there is a risk in taking decisions too early, because we can't predict the future in the short and medium term, and that's, I think, a failing in the initial Conservative motion. There's also the risk of taking decisions too late, and I'm not saying that the Liberal Democrat administration is going to do that, but certainly I think in the way that this amendment has been put in, doesn't take up the opportunity to continue the discussion we're having. I think the Labour group are going to abstain on this debate, in part because I would actually agree with Paul Myers' original question about whether this amendment is valid or not, because I think if it had come from an opposition group, then it probably would have been less sympathetically received than when it came from the administration. We do need a continuing and ongoing debate and planning into the future. I'm not sure either the resolution or the way this amendment has been put actually helps us in that discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. I've got Councillor May next, please, and then Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make the point that Baines has been fortunate for many, many years in the fact that it's had the sources of income that has taken many of the pressures away. Councillor Samuel would know that other local authorities have not had that luxury, and the end result has been that the council has over-relied on those sources of income for a long period of time and not had quite the same pressures as other local authorities. And that's created a culture in the authority where finance always comes up at the last minute and solves all the problems. I think COVID-19 has been a wake-up call, and I don't think that quoting SIPFA at this stage, which is about the public finances, is the right solution, because I think the world has changed. We've got a new normal, and I think if you want to change culture, it takes a long period of time. So I think that, quite honestly, we need to think and plan over a longer period of time. It may mean we need to stop doing some nice things, and that would be really difficult politically. I appreciate that. But it is a time, I think, that we need to rebase our budgets and think again. I asked a question about going to zero-based budgeting and was told we're not going to do that. But if you don't actually look at everything that you're doing as a council, then I think you're going to get into real trouble in the future. So I support the Conservative motion, original motion, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're talking on the Liberal Democrat amendment at the moment. So Councillor Hurst, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I slightly despair, really. What we've got in front of us is the original motion that was put forward. We've heard already from colleagues what a lot of nonsense it was, really. It was trying to paint a reality that just doesn't exist, and that the amendments that Richard and the team have put forward is trying to salvage that motion to something helpful and useful. Nobody is in denial that I've heard about the challenge that COVID is creating, and it's requiring a significant amount of rethinking, resetting, and redeveloping the strategy for this council. And the motion that was put forward was just not going to provide that solution. It needs a little bit more longer term thinking, a little bit more reality, and a little bit less of the party politics, really, around that aspect. So I think what the amendment that Richard's put forward is a sensible way forward, which is giving the council the time to develop its strategies and its thinking and refocus. That COVID is still, we're far from out of the woods yet, and so nothing is certain yet. So we're buying some time to get this right, and I just think that the parties pushing forward the original motion are just in playing games really around this. They're not really focusing on the task in hand. So I urge everyone to support the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a lot of comments coming through. I've got Councillor Duguid. I will ask Councillor Samuel to respond to some of the points that have been made, and then I'll go back to Councillor Myers as the mover of the original motion. So, Councillor Duguid, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just remind members of the opposition that the government hasn't even published their plan for this year, let alone next year, or the next 3 years, or the next 5 years. There's just knee-jerk after knee-jerk coming out of Downing Street at the moment. No plan for raising taxes, no plans for cutting expenditure, frankly, no idea. How can you put a credible longer-term plan together when we don't even know what government is planning? Please get real on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duguid. So, Councillor Sammy, there's a few points of fact that need to be responded to there. Like I did with Councillor Johnson, I'll give you the right to reply, please.
Thank you. Well, echoing Councillor Duguid's comments, government financial planning in response to COVID has been identified as chaotic and non-existent by MPs. That's the starting point. There is huge uncertainty about current, future government funding intentions for local government, and an understandable wish here among members to suddenly find the answer. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It ain't coming quickly because the information is not there. And what I am not going to do is to put a plan to cabinet and then on to council that simply has foundations of sand. So that is not going to happen. Amongst the things that we know are in the pipeline are the fair funding review, not ended, a spending review, not published, and likely changes to the business rate retention scheme, and also changes to combined authority roles, which will undoubtedly affect us. There is a lot of uncertainty. We cannot plan on uncertainty. What I will acknowledge, and this is really blunt to say, that the council's reliance on over-reliance, I put it, on commercial income from retail property and tourism-related activities cannot continue. It is not sustainable. And that is the cruel reality of the COVID crisis. It has laid bare our exposure to these issues. So we undoubtedly will be considering how we deal with this. But I'd like to know from opposition members, rather than posturing politically about this, which adult social services will they cut? Which children's services will they cut? Which kind of services that our communities value will they cut? Because that's the blunt truth. When you downscale your budget by the extent needed to remove the reliance on these external income sources, these are the difficult questions we will have to answer. So it's no point in posturing at this point. We are working on this already. When we have the information that we need to present a credible plan, it will come forward to Cabinet. Thank you very much, Councillor O'Brien. So what I will say to you all is we are going to publish a revised medium-term financial strategy in the autumn. We are working on that now. And when that will lead into the budget report, which will contain the full look ahead on financial strategy that members of the opposition are calling for. The final point I'd make to the meeting is not one member of the opposition who has spoken tonight has bothered to approach me or the leader of the council to talk to us about these issues. It's all been done in public in these kind of forums. That's not the way to do business. If you want to get your point across, come and talk to me. I'm here. So, Chairman, that's where I finish on that.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Sorry, back to Councillor Myers to sum up on that. That concludes the amendment, but I've got Councillor Myers to sum up on the amendment, please.
Well, I couldn't have explained the nonsense of this administration's approach to finance better than what I have heard from them this evening. They talk about the government just handing out money, and what we're talking about is huge loss of income from within the council's own businesses. And yes, Councillor Samuel says we can't rely on them in future, but quite frankly, I think it's about time he actually looked to produce a 5-year plan for those businesses instead of just waiting for the government to bail us out again and again. And as for saying the government's in financial disarray, that financial disarray didn't stop our government actually providing essential funding from tens of millions of pounds in a major national crisis. So I find that quite staggering, what he's just said. So I think it's about time, instead of accusing us of political posturing, that he considers our opposition group has tried to be constructive, to try and save this council, to try and get it to look ahead, to try and benefit and manage businesses. That there's this idea that you can just run a business and get all that heritage income, all that commercial estate income, just like it was described Marks and Spencer's. You can sit back and the money will roll in. And then when it doesn't roll in, then the government just has to bail us out, because we can't imagine what we're going to do with those businesses over the next 5 years, because we have no idea how to manage businesses, even though it's 20% of our income we've lost largely because of those businesses being in trouble. Whether COVID or not had actually struck, those businesses and that income would have been under threat. So as for making all sorts of accusations as well about me not speaking to him, I have rung up Richard, and I have tried on numerous occasions as well, yes, in public, to try and put this point across. This motion was an attempt to try and bring this at proper attention and to try and get the administration to reconsider. So otherwise, I'm just very, very disappointed that the administration has its fingers in its ears and its head in the sand.
Thank you, Councillor Mice, for that. Right, so we've got is somebody trying to speak? No. We have a Liberal Democrat amendment that has been moved and seconded. We've debated. It's been summed up by the mover of the original motion. So we'll go to a vote on that. So as it's the Liberal Democrat amendment, I'm presuming that will be the majority position. So those against or abstaining, please make yourself clear. This is on the Liberal Democrat motion, please. Liberal Democrat amendment, please. And while people are voting, what we're then going to do is we've still got the substantive on the table. We're getting short for time, but we'll manage that, I'm sure, in the time available. So, Joe, there are quite a number of againsts here.
17 so far.
Hello.
Hi, Councillor Moss, are you there?
I think so.
Well, I can hear you.
Grant's voted. Yeah, looks like Grant's voted for me.
Okay, please count that, Joe.
Sorry, I got dumped.
Yeah, Councillor Sally Davies is also.
Yes, so I've got 18 against.
Yeah. Any abstentions?
I haven't seen any abstentions.
No. And we know how many are in the room, although there is a majority position.
I think there are 58 in the room. If
yeah, I think
nobody's told me that they've left apart from one.
Yeah, I think.
So, that is lost. But sorry.
Yeah. So the amendment wins.
So the amendment
the vote
is carried. Yes. Sorry.
Is carried, yes. And therefore the amendment becomes the substantive.
Yep.
Right, and then on that basis, I then ask the mover of the now substantive motion to sum up, do I? That's what I do, don't I?
Does anyone want any further debate on it?
Richard, is Richard there? Paul Myers, any further debate on it?
Well, Chairman, I'm not going to debate anymore because I think we've heard enough tonight.
Yes.
But what I would say to members of the opposition is, I repeat what I said in my earlier comments. We do have clear way through this. We know exactly what we've got to do. We are going to do it, but we will only produce the information necessary to produce the sorts of things that opposition members are calling for when we have accurate information. And all of us know that if we produce information before either a cabinet meeting or a council meeting that does not stand up to scrutiny, it won't be going anywhere. So I would just ask members to be patient and wait until the information is available, and then we will publish our proposals for the future. And they will propose a different direction for the council because they have to. So that's what I'd say in my closing remarks, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's quite a number of councillors asking for move to the vote. I think, as everyone said, there's not much more that can be added. I think everyone had a fair crack at the whip during the amendments debate. So we'll move to the vote on the substantive, please, which has been amended by the Liberal Democrats. Yeah. Those against or abstaining, please. There's a number coming in. Everyone's getting used to this now. They're all ready. Look, poised. There's an abstention there. There's a couple of abstentions coming in, Joe.
Sorry, Chair, I say I could abstain. It should have been against. Apologies. As Vic Clark.
Okay, Vic Clark should have been against, not abstain. No, okay. Okay, Vic. It's not easy doing this. Joe, have we got those? Do you want Maria to help? Or Will? Is Will still here?
I think I've got 11 against and 10 abstentions. But hang on. Let's just double check.
So it's from the point where we said, I will move to the vote. Agreed, I will move to the vote.
Yes.
I believe.
Okay, so I have 21 of against an abstention, which means that it is
The substantive is the substantive as amended by the Liberal Democrat amendment is carried.
Yes, with 37 votes in favour.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, everyone understand that? So we've got 37 in favour of the substantive and 21 against or abstention, 21 in the other camp. Let's put it that way. We'll get the numbers right as we go through these now. We'll just check those numbers. We think it's 15 and 60.
No. Last go.
Yeah, so it demonstrates that in this case, the roll call might be the answer.
Yeah, I think I've got 10 abstentions and 11 against.
Yeah.
Which actually makes sense in terms of
21 is the total number. Okay, so that's that. Karen, are you?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because Colin Blackburn voted against, and somebody who said, was it Vic Clark, was abstaining, but he wanted to vote against.
Okay. Shall we? No, this is absolutely the reason. Joe, can we've got a couple of minutes just to go through a roll call and then we call it a night. Can we do that, please? Sorry, everyone, but we just want to.
Okay.
This is exactly when we do this. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Yep. Rob Appleyard.
For.
Tim Ball.
For.
Sarah Bevan.
Abstain.
Colin Blackburn.
Against.
Alison Bourne.
For.
Shelley Bromley.
For.
Neil Butters.
For.
Vic Clark.
Against.
Sue Craig.
For.
Paul Crossley.
For.
Jerry Curran.
For.
Chris Dando.
Abstain.
Just David.
For.
Tom Davis.
For.
Sally Davis.
Against.
Doug Deacon. Winston Dogood.
4.
Mark Elliott.
4.
Michael Evans. Michael Evans. Andy Furs.
4.
Kevin Guy. Alan Hale.
Against.
Liz Hardman.
Abstain.
Steve Hedges.
4.
Joel Hurst.
4.
Lucy Hodge.
They didn't hear that because you're muted.
Lucy Hodge.
4. Can you hear me?
Duncan Hounsell.
4.
Sean Hughes.
Against.
Eleanor Jackson.
Abstain.
Grant Johnson.
You were muted. They didn't hear what you said.
Abstain.
Dr. Kumar.
4.
Hal McPhee.
4.
Ruth Malloy.
4.
Paul May.
Against.
Matt McCabe.
4.
Sarah Moore.
4.
Robin Moss.
Lash and Bennett.
Robin.
Robin's abstaining, but I think he's having
Abstain.
technical problems.
Sorry, I've got
Thank
technology
you.
problems here.
Yes, thank you. Paul Myers.
Against.
Lisa O'Brien.
Against.
Michelle O'Doherty.
4.
Sarat Pankania.
4.
Vic Pritchard.
Against.
Amanda Rigby.
4.
Dina Romero.
4.
Mark Roper.
4.
Richard Samuel.
4.
Bruce Shern.
4.
Brian Simmons. Brian, are you there?
Unmute, Brian.
Okay. Alistair Singleton.
4.
Sean Stevenson McGall.
4.
Andy Waite.
4.
Karen Walker.
Against.
Sarah Warren.
4.
Karen Warrington.
4.
Chris Watt.
Against.
Ryan Wills.
4.
David Wood.
4.
Joanna Wright.
4. She didn't even sense you were muted.
Doug Deacon, are you able to
Abstaining.
vote? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm abstaining, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I've also had a message that Kevin's having technical problems and he is voting for. There's a message there. There was also, Doug, Michael Evans. Is Michael Evans back in the room? Available? No.
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, he did originally vote against.
Yeah. Okay.
Chair.
Yeah.
I had a middle-aged moment. Sorry, I voted for, and I meant to vote against. It's been a very, very long day.
It has. Yes. Okay. Understood. Okay. Right. Okay. So, do we have those numbers, Joe?
Yes, we do. Just hang on with that adjustment. Yes, we have 37 votes for, 12 against and 7 abstentions. So the substantive is carried.
Substantive is carried. Thank you, everyone. And apologies for the slowness of that, but we got there in the end. So that's the substantive as amended by the Liberal Democrat amendment Is carried, yes.
Yes.
Item 15 on the agenda, there's no questions notified,
Correct.
and therefore I am happy to close the meeting.